Hello again, friends. And you are our friends unless you work in creative at the WWE. And welcome back to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive Thru right here. A day later than usual, getting ready to review the horror show, or some might say the horrible show, that just aired on pay-per-view. Plus answering your questions like we usually do here on the show. They are sent in on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru or via email to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com. I am your host, the great Brian Last. My pleasure to be with you once again, despite some of the content we have to talk about today. And of course, the man whose review you've all been waiting for, the man who will be answering your questions, the leader of the cult of Cornette, the exalted one of the hot tub, Mr. Jim Cornette.
I loathe you.
Me?
I detest you. My hatred for you burns with the heat of 1,000 suns. You are despicable.
I assume you're doing a bit. You can't be talking about me. Was that a George Costanza?
You, Brian Last, you are despicable.
What did I do?
You had the opportunity. You could have stopped it. You saw it first. You knew it was coming. You watched that thing first, but when we talked, and I said, I haven't seen it yet, for reasons I'll go into in a minute, he said, oh, make sure you don't fast forward through the Sasha Banks match. That's all you said. No warning of what was to come. It's like if you had been standing on a street corner, a busy street in any city in the United States, and you had seen a rainbow bread truck barreling down on some decrepit old lady with a cane hobbling across the street, and you had a choice to make. You could have said, Mrs. Cane lady, look out. And she would have seen that truck and hopefully moved out of the way. You could have even taken it upon yourself to rush over there and football tackle that old broad out of the path of that truck. But you choose the third option. Stand there and watch the wreck. That's what you did to me, Brian Last. I'll never forgive you for it. You saw that chauffeur. You could have easily said, no, Jim. If you value your sanity, if you value your time, you've only got a certain amount of time remaining on this earth. If you value your peace of mind and any hope that you've ever had of retaining one shred of respect and love for the wrestling industry that you've given your life to, don't watch that fucking show. But no, not you, not the great Brian Last. You sat there in the front booth of the French Toast Chateau, sipping your coffee through a straw while you have your mask on, and you watched that truck run me right over. Did nothing to prevent it.
However angry you may be at this moment, just imagine how angry I would be if I watched that event and you didn't. If I watched that event and then you said, you know what, I decided not to watch it, and I wasted, you asked me how long is the event, and I couldn't tell you. Because some people told me it was only 2.5 hours. It felt much, much longer than that, so I wasn't even sure. It felt like I was watching it for 5 hours. I'm sure it wasn't 5 hours, but if I had watched it and you hadn't, I probably would have walked off the show today.
See, that's the only thing that really could have cheered me up, is if I'd have thought to done that.
That would have cheered you up.
That would have cheered me. That would have made me feel better. If I'd have thought to say, nah, I'm just not going to watch it, and then told you, nah, I didn't watch it. See, that already, that's bringing a smile to my, you can hear the change in my tone to just even think of that possibility. Oh, I should have done that. Now I blame myself. All right. Anyway, I want to apologize. I told you that I was going to take the responsibility here on myself today to let everybody know the reason the show is delayed somewhat. We were originally going to delay anyway. Instead of coming out on Monday, we were going to come out on Tuesday early after having had a chance to digest this bit of undigested beef from a Charles Dickens fucking novel that we watched. But then I postponed it even further because a lot of people have seen on Twitter, and thank everybody that's sent their positive wishes and etc. But we heard Bobby Fulton was back in the hospital late on Sunday, and I wasn't ever going to watch this thing live anyway because I can't stay up that late, especially through this stuff. But I was going to watch it early on Monday, but with just finding out about Bobby on Sunday late, Monday morning when I got up, I got a hold of his son Dylan, who unfortunately is not there in Ohio with him right at this second, and his other son's back in North Carolina also because he'd gotten a clean bill of health, and so they had gone. Jaron had gone back to North Carolina, and Dylan's there. But I got a hold of him so he could tell me what was going on. And another member of Bobby's family had taken him to the hospital on Sunday with from the treatments that he had for the throat cancer. It damaged one of his arteries, which was bleeding internally and in a later stage externally, apparently. And they had to take him to the hospital for that because they couldn't stop it, and they had to do a procedure on him Monday morning to do that. And at the same time as they evaluated him on Sunday, they found out that his cancer has returned in a different part of his throat. So, and I'm not sure yet as we speak here what they're doing about that, but they did do the procedure to get this artery taken care of, and that's okay. And then I was able to, and it was about 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon before I was able to actually talk to him. Then Dylan hooked us up on a 3-way, from the hospital through Dylan's phone to mine, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, the wonders of technology. But he obviously sounds like he'd rather be anywhere else. He sounds like shit talking because he just had surgery on his throat. And he's been through a bunch of shit, but he was there and knew what we were talking about and et cetera. And so I can't say he was feeling better. He was obviously feeling better than how he was, but you can't call the way he was feeling at that point still better. And then that was just yesterday. So by the time that all that went on, we weren't going to sit down, and I was not going to watch this. Thank goodness I didn't try to watch this before all that. So after that was taken care of, then I watched this fiasco that was perpetrated on the American public. Then you got to edit this thing because I may use a profanity or two. We may have to bleep something. So it'll be out when it comes out, and most of it is my fault. But as far as Bobby, we just want to again say everybody sends their thoughts and prayers, but they really mean it. It's not just a cliche, and he ain't out of the woods yet, but we're going to see if we can give an update on the experience this week. We will do that. I hope I've talked to him again by then and see what's going on. But that's why we're running behind here this week.
I'm sure everyone's sending their best wishes to Bobby Fulton, a great guy. Not just a great guest on the show, not just a great wrestler, but truly one of the good guys in wrestling, a really, really nice guy, and we hope everything turns out the best for him.
It was always great, and not to knock any of the other partners, but when you had a Fantastics Midnight Express match, you had two of the nicest guys in all of wrestling that nobody ever knocked, both in the same match. That's unusual because they're so few and far between. And speaking of other nice guys,
you're talking about the two Bobbies, I assume.
Yes.
Okay.
Bobby Eaton and Bobby Fulton. Yeah.
Someone's knocking Dennis Condrey. That's what I'm saying.
No. Nobody ever accused Dennis of being overly nice. But anyway, another nice guy in and around the wrestling business. Get well, John fell. No, he didn't fall again. He's done some kind of bullshit to him. So I think they're trying to give him a brain transplant, but he didn't have one to trade with the other guys. But anyway, get well, John.
What happened to John? I actually haven't heard anything about this.
He had a minor spell of something where he was just feeling puny, as Christine Jarrett used to say, he was feeling puny and under the weather. But he didn't fall this time. We keep him off of ladders, and he's not allowed to climb more than 2 flights of stairs just because of his proclivity toward clumsiness.
Well, get well, John. I didn't know anything about that. He was
Well, don't put him at death's door now. I was just saying, hey, get well, John. He was feeling under the weather for a few days, and now suddenly you're writing him off.
And I also want to say, get well, Charlie from Starkville, Mississippi.
What the fuck? Is he jumping on the sick bandwagon now?
Well, he hasn't had a question on in a couple of weeks. I figure he may be.
Oh, you know what? COVID may have got fucking Charlie from Starkville because it's starting to spread to the suburbs and the hinterlands now. You never know about who will take Charlie. If Charlie is COVIDed, who will take Charlie's place as the premier question asker? Do you have to wait and are you taking bids on this position?
I am not taking bids on this position, no.
I'm sure some people will accuse you of doing that.
No, he's like...
that was not a full-throated defense of you're not taking bids on
John Fell is kind of like...
Wait, we're back to John.
Well, now. John Fell is kind of like Steve Rhodes on Married with Children. And then Charlie's like the Ted McGinley character that replaced him. You
didn't even go with the obvious Dick York, Dick Sargent. You went straight to the fucking Married with Children, and because Marcy was such a fucking hooer anyway. You never know. She could have come in with they should have had that where she came in with a different husband every fucking show. That would have been perfect. Marcy was a hooer.
Several people wrote that, this was, and I think this is wrong, that this pay-per-view event was the WWE jumping the shark. And all I'm thinking is, when Fonzie jumped the shark, Richie Cunningham was still on the show. This isn't the WWE jumping the shark. This is Ted McGinley coming on to Happy Days. That's what this is, this period of time in the WWE.
Besides that poor shark has so many goddamn surfboard marks on its back at this point from the last few weeks of AEW that I'm afraid that the PETA people should take care of that poor shark. People are jumping him right and left. He's been jumped more often than goddamn Elisha Cook Jr. in all those old gangster movies.
You know what?
Yeah, that was a real deep one.
I just killed AEW last week on The Experience, probably even worse than you did.
You turned into me. We switched places. Somebody tweeted, said it was the greatest double babyface heel turn since fucking Austin and Hart at WrestleMania.
And I feel like every time I do that, every time I just get to the point where I'm like, you know what? I hate AEW. I really don't want to watch this again. We watch a WWE event, and I realize, you know what? They're not so bad. They're not so bad.
Hey, you know what? It's like, as a matter of fact, it's like a challenge now, I guess, between the two companies. Because we said last week, I did at least, that AEW probably put on the hokiest, chintziest, cheesiest, phoniest, bullshittest, outlaw fucking mud show wrestling television program I've ever seen. And then Vince McMahon said, "Oh, hold on there, pal. You really think so?" And I'll beat him. And he does it with a bigger budget. But anyway, we'll get to that in a few minutes. I'm still percolating over you. But I want to, before I get in too bad a mood, mention that I'm proud of myself because if you are a Cornette's Collectibles customer at JimCornette.com that has ordered from the time that we opened the store on Friday, July 17th through Monday morning, July 20th, your stuff is shipping on Wednesday, July 22nd and Friday the 24th. The internationals will go out Friday and Saturday, 24th and 25th. And the stuff from Monday the 20th through Thursday the 24th will start shipping on Monday the 28th. I'm keeping up a 5 to 7 day turnaround so far in my projections. It hadn't got too crazy. So there is but still remember, folks, especially on the internationals, allow extra time because of the pandemic. But T-shirts, copies of Behind the Curtain, the soon-to-be award-winning as soon as it gets nominated for one, graphic novel, the Cult of Cornette membership certificates, they're flying off the shelves at the newly reopened JimCornette.com, operated by the newly replenished and rejuvenated Jim Cornette. So, and by the way, one more thing before I get off on the merchandise topic. Did you see the fucking guy? Several people alerted me to this last month when the variant action figure went on sale. Almost as soon as they went on sale, and certainly before any had been mailed out, I hadn't signed a one or mailed a one, some asshole in the United Kingdom put up on eBay one of these figures and said the description was signed with his famous phrase. I think he was going to write in "thank you, fuck you, bye" in his own hand because I found his order, because the guy actually put his real name on the eBay. and address. It was the same way I found it, right? Yeah, it's this guy. He just said, just sign it, Jim Cornette. He was going to even forge thank you, fuck you, bye. And I don't know lots about the eBay. However, it looked to me like, and I think I mentioned this to you once, when the same person is bidding over and over again, it looks like they're bidding against themselves. He bid this thing up to, I can't remember the Great Britain poundage, but it was over $1,100 in American money.
Jesus.
Which has got to be worth something somewhere in the world in this day and age, American money. But he was bidding against, he was trying, because nobody is going to do that. Nobody is, there's plenty of other figures on the market that are not going for anywhere near that amount of money. I think this guy was trying to get some sucker hooked to con them out of $1,000 or more dollars for a partially forged fucking action figure that he purchased for me for retail price, and I hadn't even sent to him. He didn't even have the courtesy to wait till that figure was in his cold, clammy hand before he turned around and tried to fuck members of the cult of Cornette. And I'll tell you something right goddamn now. Anybody out there is going to fuck a member of the cult of Cornette, it's going to be me. And if I ain't fucking any of them, nobody else is going to. You're all mine out there to fuck first. And if I ain't fucking you, I'm sure not going to let anybody else fuck you. So what I did was I waited until every single figure was mailed out, till his eBay sale was closed, till the whole shebang was fucking over with, and then an extra day. And then I sent him his money back and told him to piss off. I saw his little fucking stunt, and we're done. No figures for you. So anybody was wondering about the resolution of that, look, because people were sending me on Twitter, look at this fight. I hate to say this, it almost devalued some of my regular figures were not even getting a bid, and this one was $1,100. Fuck you. You fucking clown, you con, whatever you were trying to do over there. Shady people. Shady, shady people.
Speaking of shady people, let's get some questions here.
Wait a minute. Did you just laugh when I talked about the fact that if I'm not going to be fucking the Cornette, the cult of Cornette, nobody else is? I think that's a very honorable stand for me to take.
I guess so. That was a few minutes ago. I guess that stuck with you, that you went back to that.
Well, yeah, you started laughing at me like you were making mockery of me, like I would let somebody come in and take my place in the front of the line to fuck any of the members of the cult of Cornette.
What, did you just open a beer? What was that in the background?
Sprite Zero.
Oh, that's right. You drink them out of cans.
Well, of course. We've gone over this, Brian. The cans are better. They keep the drink cooler, especially in these summer times.
It would be a lot cooler that while you're talking about fucking the fans, you're opening a beer and just casually sitting back. Yeah, I'm going to fuck the fans.
I don't lie to anybody. All right, what are we doing?
I think what we're doing is getting a few questions here on the show. Of course, we have this review coming. We'll get more questions later on, but a popular topic that many people have sent in a question about. I don't know if this video just emerged or if it was just recently noticed or if it's just going around now, but we've received many emails about a video from the WWF, now WWE, 1994, shortly before WrestleMania 10 at Madison Square Garden, where you're out there and Lex Luger is introduced as the WWF champion, and he comes out wearing the belt. Now, I remember this because in the sheets, and I was getting the Torch at the time and the Observer at the time, the Torch had a photo of it, the Observer wrote about it. The presumption was this was being shot so that they had the footage ready to go after WrestleMania 10 when Lex Luger would, rumor has it, win the World Heavyweight Championship, and they would have the footage already. They would have the new open of the show, Luger in the ring with the belt. Of course, that did not happen. What did happen? What was the reason behind this? What can you tell? You were involved, so what can you tell me? What do you remember about all this?
You are all incorrect, sir. It was not done for that reason. It was done for the opposite reason. Because at that, especially, and I can't remember where we were that night, but Raw was still playing the smaller buildings, as they say in the business. It wasn't, the 16, 18, 20,000 seat arena every Monday night that it became later on in the 90s. It was still a smaller building, so it was somewhere and probably in the Northeast. But the whole idea was there were still some smart fans, even if it wasn't in New York City or Philadelphia in the mid-90s. That obviously the Torch had a picture and the Observer had a report, which is exactly what they wanted. The smart fans knew when we were there taping syndicated television, 4 different shows, they can do the math from where we are in, on the calendar. And one of those shows at least had to air after WrestleMania. So if Yokozuna came out with the belt, or if Luger came out without the belt, you see where I'm going, and people will get the fucking message. So in the building, and this was done a number of times by Vince in the 80s. Dusty Crockett, we never taped television that far out. And Dusty, we only taped syndicated TV every 2 weeks and taped the TBS show every weekend. WWE or WWF, even, 80s, early 90s, was doing, as you'll recall, 4 or 5 weeks of syndication in one night. So they would have somewhere or another, I think they did this with the Steiners one night. I know they did it a few times in the 80s. They'd do something for the people in the building where fucking, maybe it was even dark. It wasn't even on a previous show, where maybe Luger and Yoko got in a dust up, or the champion and the challenger got in a dust up, and the challenger made off with the fucking belt, or the champion, if he was a heel, bailed out and ran and left the belt, and the challenger grabbed it or whatever. Then later on in the night, the fucking guy would come out with it because he still had it. The people saw him fucking steal it, right? The announcing him as WWF champion, as I recall also in the building, was done at Luger's insistence, right? To mock Yoko, or I was involved somehow where he's not the real champion. And they introduced him and they got the thing walking out or whatever, just to make the people wonder what the fuck's going to happen. So it was actually the opposite. Rather than getting ready and having footage already for something that was definitely going to happen, they were trying to make people question, well, is it or isn't it? Well, yeah, that's how they covered it up. That's how Luger got the belt here tonight, but he's got it on TV, so I bet she's going to win. But they didn't know. So, but that's what, and that was done up there on a number of occasions, as I remember hearing.
So this specific instance, this was done purely to fool the smart fans and the newsletter readers?
Just to fucking, make them wonder what the fuck was going to happen. And if you'll notice, on the end of this clip, Luger drops the belt in the fucking ring.
He throws it at you.
That's right. He throws it at me, but he leaves it. He gives it back. That was never on television. That was just for the fucking people there. But at the same time, they're like, oh, that's how they got around it. Because the smart fans knew that's how they got around it the time before, when it really did fucking change. And that's why the guy had the belt. But then the next time it didn't. So they didn't know. But yeah, that's been done on a number of occasions in the WWF, going back all the way to when Vince took over, where they would monkey with who had physical possession of the belt and who walked out with it. Or if a guy was going to lose a belt, or tag team was going to lose belts at a big show, they would get them stolen or taken away or whatever the fuck earlier in the night in front of those people, so they could come out later on without them, and it made sense. This is just the opposite of that.
Vince really blew it with Luger. Obviously, he's not the greatest wrestler of all time, but I think there was a moment you could have done something with him. We've talked about the SummerSlam 93 finish and the big celebration for him not winning the belt. And then he went into the Ludwig Borga feud, which we could easily forget about.
I was about to, that's when you could tell Vince had given up. And that's what I'd actually said on an interview right before SummerSlam, where I said in pretty much these exact words, I said, Luger's going to look like a plate full of piss if he doesn't win, isn't he? And then I found out because I was sure he was going to win. And then I found out from Vince that he wasn't going to win. And my mouth dropped open. And I said, and then I heard the finish. Oh, we're going to milk the chase until WrestleMania. I'm like, oh boy, I don't think there's that much milk left in this cow. But yeah, right there at SummerSlam, if he'd have beat Yoko, you could have got 6 probably good months at a package at that point, but you never got another good week out of him after that fucking finish. It was over. It was downhill from there.
Well, I hadn't watched any footage from this time period in a little while, so I'd forgotten that Lex Luger's theme song was Stars and Stripes Forever. And in 1994, I mean, there was a moment of real patriotic fan fervor for Lex Luger versus the dreaded Japanese Yokozuna because we were at war with Japan.
Well, no, actually, there was interest in 93, but by 94, there was less interest. Yeah.
But by 94, I have to say, him coming out to that music is such a mistake. And he used to have cool music in like WCW in 1989. Luger had the coolest music of anyone because you guys were using the bootleg Midnight Express music. And then he comes out to that. It's hard to, it's corny. It's cheesy. It's very Vince.
Yeah, it was very Vince-ish. But that's what that was, that clip. I saw that the other day, and that's the first time I thought of it and remembered it. But that's what they would do. They would just monkey with shit so the people knew there was TV being done over weeks of time. They wouldn't be completely sure of the outcomes. There would be a reason why that they saw a guy with or not with a championship belt on something that would obviously air after the big match.
When did Luger find out he wasn't getting the belt?
I don't know. But I can't imagine he was too happy after that whole fucking buildup. He was the most famous bus driver since Ralph Cramden. And all of a sudden it was the end of the line and they transferred to another station.
What did you think about the event at the Intrepid where he body slammed Yokozuna? They flew him in via helicopter as the surprise after various wrestlers and football players couldn't body slam him. That was right before you joined the WWF, but what did you think about that event?
Well, I didn't think anything of it until afterwards because it was not only before I joined the WWF, it was before Bruce had called me. So I wasn't even watching. I knew it had happened because I read it in the Observer, right? But then after I got the call and I started going back and watching shit, and that's when I saw it. And it was a glorified hip toss. McMahon, that's all it was. It wasn't a full body slam. But yeah, I was not even watching their show, to be quite honest. Obviously not breaking my lifelong habit. And Bruce calls me up and says, hey, you guys want to make some shots? Okay, well, now I guess I got to fucking see what the shit looks like. And I had no idea about the Yoko thing until I showed up, as we've talked about ad nauseum. So I didn't do a lot of prep otherwise than to go in and know approximately where they put their cameras on their television program and with the intent of trying to get the Heavenly Bodies over.
Where did you debut? Was it White Plains or Poughkeepsie?
Alexandria Bay, New York.
Oh, okay. Was that this? Because I'm remembering it looked like a very sweaty night.
Yeah,
But the other one, the one where you guys actually had the in-ring confrontation, you and Fuji and Yokozuna and Luger in his suit, and he's sweating through his suit. You can feel how hot it is just watching that. Where was that?
Oh, God, I'd have to get my 93 date book out because I don't fucking remember. The only reason I remembered Alexandria Bay is because I'd heard of a lot of places in New York, but I'd never heard of that. And when we were booked, they said, yeah, you'll do the first night is Raw in Alexandria Bay, New York. And I looked on the atlas. I'm like, what the fuck? We had to fly somewhere and then drive some more to get there. And when we pulled up, that's what I'm saying. In the first couple of years, Raw was not in the bigger buildings. There was White Plains Convention Center. There was a Poughkeepsie, the Mid-Hudson Civic Center up there. I love that Poughkeepsie was connected to the hotel we stayed in, and they had nice room service. So that was actually easy to work. You could eat, fucking sleep, and work and not even go outside. But Alexandria Bay, we pull up, me and Tom Pritchard and Jimmy Del Rey, we pull up in the fucking rental car after coming all this way to wherever the hell this place was. And it was a big, like a tin-roofed hockey type building. I would say rodeo arena, but I don't think they have rodeos up there. So it's probably hockey, but it was one of these goddamn rec centers. There was no air conditioning. It seated like probably 2,500, 3,000 people. It's jammed in, sweating like a fucking whore in church. And we all looked at each other like, this is the fucking WWF. This is Monday Night Raw. And I mean, they were still in some of those buildings for Raw back then in those days. So it was not an auspicious debut in terms of, hopefully they were more impressed with us than we were with their fucking facility that first night. Because it was, I don't know they ever ran that again for television, at least.
Well, there's the answer everyone's been waiting for about why Lex Luger had the belt.
A burning question of why. I thought everybody knew that they used to do that back in those days.
I thought so too, and that's kind of what I presumed the answer would be. But again, I don't know why, but all of a sudden recently a lot of people have been asking this, and I guess it's because the video has gone around again.
Well, was that sneaky John Boucher that put that video? He has people's home movies. I don't know how it's like he broke into my wallet one time. He's got some shit that nobody should have.
I don't know how sneaky John Boucher is. He's a very fine gentleman.
He finds all this stuff. You don't know where he's getting it from. I think he's a cat burglar in his full-time work. Anyway.
He might be. He's in Queens.
You know, we got a new sponsor. And I am so thrilled about this because here's the thing. Besides the fact we've talked about the social distancing and people not being able to visit their families, see their families, and take family pictures and everything, you can actually now get family pictures even if you don't have your family all in the same place. Have you heard about this? Have you read about this?
I have. This is pretty exciting stuff we're about to talk about.
Paint Your Life. PaintYourLife.com. Here's the deal. Whether you want to give your parents, grandparents, friends, kids, grandkids, a birthday gift, wedding gift, anniversary gift. Like I said, you can't get everybody together for the family pictures like everybody used to love to take. Well, now you can have a picture painted, even if your family's not together. The people at Paint Your Life take any photograph of your family and a professional artist paints it by hand, does a painting. And not only if the whole family isn't together in that picture, they can work from different pictures. If your grandparents passed away before they saw their grandchildren, you can have a painting of the whole family because they can work off of different pictures, which that's the coolest thing. And these are world-class artists. This is not like the fucking job they did on Seinfeld to fucking airbrush George Costanza's boss back into the fucking beach picture, right? He looked like a goddamn Disney caricature. This is real life stuff. But anyway, so whether it's a picture you have already or several pictures of people that you'd like combined in your family picture, paintyourlife.com can do the whole deal. Any picture, they say, you can choose from a team of artists and work with them until the details are perfect. It's a friendly platform, so you can order your custom-made, hand-painted portraits quick and easy. It takes about 3 weeks to get them. And it makes a great gift. And the way you can save money, because we always do that to you, or for you. It depends on which way you're looking at it. 20% off and free shipping if you text DRIVE, D-R-I-V-E, such as this program, DRIVE, to 64,000. That's a familiar number. We've said this number before. 64 with 3 zeros behind it for that one guy that couldn't get the picture. 64,000. Text DRIVE to 64,000. You can get 20% off and free shipping at paintyourlife.com. And there's no risk. If you don't love the final painting, your money is refunded, guaranteed. So I don't know what more we can do for anybody. We're making up paintings, world-class quality paintings from scratch off of your pictures, giving you 20% off, free shipping.
And it's guaranteed.
Guaranteed. Money back guarantee.
That's fantastic.
Goddamn. The only thing they can't do is they can't make anybody in your family look any less uglier than they may be really. So don't expect that. You're going to get a painting that looks like the people in your family. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, only you can say. PaintYourLife.com. Celebrate the moments that matter most.
I want them to paint a picture of the first family, that photo from 1983 of you and Jimmy Hart and your entire combined stable. That's the painting I want.
There was about 20 guys there. Right? That's when I realized, I think the first time I realized that Jerry Lawler was a booker that could not fire anybody. He'd just starve you out. There's like 40 guys in the territory. The opening match is a 10-man tag. And it's the same amount of money being divided among 40 guys, except for Lawler, who was taking it off the top first, as it was when Dundee was booking and he had 18.
You know, there's a couple things in that photo, though. You have two different monsters. You have the grapplers and the assassins.
Yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous. It is the most ridiculous. And Plowboy Frazier just hanging out in the back.
Yeah. Frank Morrell was the Lucifer, and Duke Myers was I think he was the Colossus of Death. Buddy Landell was in there. Ken Patera.
That's right.
The Dream Machine, Pork Chop Cash, me, Jimmy Hart. As you said, Plowboy, Dennis Condrey. Oh, good God.
And
the
we're forgetting
Assassins,
a few. Yeah.
Roger Smith and Donnie Bass, as you said. The Grapplers, Lynn Denton and Tony Anthony. You know what? Where is that? The picture's on my wall somewhere, but I can't see it as I'm turning around the fucking office here. We'll get back to y'all on the rest of that. Who did we forget? But there was a lot of fucking talent in there, and an Olympic weightlifter, and Troy Graham, an Olympic quality bullshitter. Boy, he had a line a mile long. Anyway, should we do this fucking thing and get it over with?
I think we have to. We can't end the show on it. We have to have some upbeat stuff.
Yeah. Somebody's got to talk me off the fucking ledge after this. An eye for an eye, Lance.
I wish it was my eye after watching that.
Yeah, if your eyeball doth offend thee, pluck it out. How about if this show offends you as badly as it did us, pluck both of our eyeballs out so we don't have to see that again. Put them in backwards so we can unlook at it. The horror show at Extreme Rules. There's no such thing really as a pay-per-view. It's in pay-per-view in name only anymore. Nobody's buying them except me, so I can watch it on the big screen. There's not much money in them, and there's no fans in the building. But I would think they'd still want to make a fucking effort, or have they just given up completely at this point? COVID will be the end of the wrestling business, as I believe I predicted a few months ago, because once they started doing this cinematic shit, they're going to do more of it, and it's going to get worse, and then other people are going to try to do it, and that's going to be worse even yet. The one thing I can say, you wanted color. You talked about NXT being dark the other night, as far as not dark as far as a tone, but dark as far as I can't see because it's too dark. Turn the light on.
That's right.
Well, this show looked like a unicorn vomited from the start.
Not the only vomit on the show.
No, as a matter of fact, Seth Rollins' puke was was he eating oatmeal as a pre-match meal? It was very bland. But the unicorn vomited all over the thing when New Day came out at the start of the program, like a bunch of spastics. They ran back and forth and fucking bounced up and down, and then old Big E laid down on his back in the middle of the ring and shook his fucking legs in the air while Kofi bounded about. And then here came Cesaro and Nakamura. This was a tables match for the SmackDown version of the World Tag Team Championship. Is that correct?
That sounds correct.
So the opening match of this horror show, the horribleness and awfulness of it will never be forgotten. As I descended the staircase, I saw the most horrible, shocking moment yet in this bloody parade of terror. The shears, the Gardner shears, were stabbed into Mrs. Simmons' throat, and there was blood coming from the wound. The Ghost and Mr. Chicken was scarier than this fucking program. Anyway, they open the show with a tables match for one of the various tag team championships. Tables everywhere. Tables lined up around the barricade. Tables underneath the fucking ring. Tables set up on the stage. Can you explain to me, Brian Last, why that it should be the goal of an athletic contest of any kind, or why that it should be a way to win a wrestling match to, quote, put your opponent through a table.
I can't explain it in general. I guess if I had to attempt to justify it here, it is the Extreme Rules pay-per-view event where every match is supposed to have some variation of ECW Extreme Rules from way back.
Yeah.
That's the only explanation I can give you. Doesn't make sense, though.
This is ECW's, the worst of the ECW bullshit, is everybody's got not just be run into a table or not just fall through a table that happens to be sitting there at ringside because the announcers or the timekeeper or somebody's added, or it's placed there for a reason, the press table that they used to have, but just because every ECW match ended up having to break a table and a bunch of fucking marks grew up and got into business in various forms, and every promotion since then puts people on tables and then dives onto them to put them through a table. But when you examine it, it makes no fucking sense. Put them through a table where their back lands on the ground and they're then covered for a count of 3, that would make sense. But just put your opponent through a table because a bunch of guys in an outlaw promotion 25 years ago used to do that in every match. We have now, and nobody even remembers now why that it should be a thing, a way to win a match, that you should put your opponent through a table. But they got to start the show out with one of these, with one of the tag team titles on the line, one of many, with 2 teams that are in the fucking middle of the fucking card and going to stay there because that's where tag teams are in this company. So they've started out with this fucking, and it's a 4-way. There's no tags. There's no disqualification, there's no rules, and there's no sense. It's a match that alternates between guys doing shit to each other and then awkwardly trying to set up tables to do another stunt or stay out of the way if it's not their time to be involved. They barely used the ring. I don't think they were in it for the first 5 minutes. They tore up the stairs. The female referee stood around and stared. She did not have Ref Aubrey's knack for trying to stay somewhat efficient or busy. She just stood there and fucking looked at it like she was a cat observing a laser pointer light on a fucking wall. I know Cesaro's good, Claudio. I know he's a tremendous worker. He actually, when he was with another tremendous worker, and I can't remember who it was, but in a singles match with no fans in the arena here a few months back, he had a believable fucking match. It was Daniel Bryan, wasn't it? I think it was.
That's exactly who it was, yeah.
Yes. So Claudio's great, but you can't be good in this. The other 3 I don't know about. I don't know if they're any good or not. I'm not really seeing a lot with the New Day is greener than a fucking pepper tree. But you can't tell anyway, because you can't have this whole thing is fucking stupid. Guys fighting around the ring and doing contrived spots where they may or may not fall through a fucking table.
Let me jump in and just say,
okay,
the New Day are talented. They're really good. The act is horrible. And I may be in the minority because I know a lot of people like their silliness and their pancakes or whatever the hell they do. But Big E is really talented. Kofi Kingston, really talented. Nakamura was probably my favorite wrestler in the world before he went to the WWE. Now he's WWE Nakamura. It's a little different, but certainly talented guys in this match. Just want to point that out.
Okay. And it's once again, I'm willing to buy that. And much like with some cases of AEW, the booking keeps me from learning that. It's keeping these guys, in a lot of cases, from getting over, whether they're gimmicking gimmicks, putting a hat on a hat, or whether they just... And there were good moments in this match. Big E did that spear on Claudio through the ropes to the floor. What a fucking bump, especially for guys that size. Big E did the deal where he boosted Kofi over the top into a Thez press on the fucking heels, but heels flipped the table up and he hit head first into the table. That would have been a nice finish. But with all the tables, no tags, no fucking sense to this thing otherwise than just beat each other up in some contrived way and set tables up. They have to milk giving Big E the suplex through the table forever because these spots are so. And then why did fucking Nakamura pull a table out from under the ring when there were 5 of them leaned up against the barricade right behind him? But they're pulling tables out from under the ring. They can't see them that are already out there in plain sight and halfway set up. They're leaned up. You could grab one easy. At one point, Kofi came off the top rope to the floor on Shinsuke and almost killed both of them. It got into the biggest mess I've ever seen with all of them having to do this shit. And then the babyface stack 2 tables up on top of each other on the floor. I wrote, are they going to use the ring at any point? Kofi does throw some embarrassing fucking punches, which I guess he's not the Lone Ranger anymore. They spend so much time trying to figure out how to do these fucking cartwheels into the goddamn shining fucking toilet plunger move that they forget they're supposed to be in a fight and they can't just punch somebody in the face. But Claudio powerbombed Kofi Kingston off the top rope to the floor through 2 tables, which was a ridiculously risky bump for this shit, for the opening match amongst middle card teams, because as that's not even a knock, that's how they're presented, because that's how all teams are presented there, middle card. What the fuck was left and we're going to see more people go through tables, but why? We're going to, after there was 20 minutes of this fucking car wreck carnage, what bump was left for anybody to take for any of the goddamn main event alleged money matches? I ask you. So it was what it was. I mean, nobody was being silly and stupid and acting obviously funny and phony. So they got AEW beat there, but why start out a show straight off the bat at 100 miles an hour with a gimmick match with multiple guys, with multiple pieces of furniture and no rules whatsoever to set the tone for your fucking evening? What are you going to follow it with?
Well, they'll answer that question shortly.
Well, there you go. Because what they did was they followed 4 guys with no rules for the tag team title with tables and fucking furniture everywhere and mass chaos and bumps threw him off the top rope. And it did look like Kofi just rang his bell on the back of his head on the floor through those tables, by the way. They followed it up with a girls match, a single girls match, Nikki Cross versus Bayley. Well, boy, they sure had a lot left to do after the previous match, didn't they? You telling me they couldn't have switched that out where you saw a regular wrestling match between 2 people to open the show before you had guys going off the top rope through fucking furniture? But anyway, I will put Bayley over here. I love her work. I love her heel attitude. I like her promos, her facials. She's got a heck of a set of abs. She looks like a fucking athlete. But this was 15 fucking minutes and I fast forwarded it. Because what the fuck? After seeing the goddamn carnage of the previous match, what are they going to do to hold? I wasn't in the arena, so I didn't have to take a piss or get popcorn, so I fast forwarded.
You have been getting some heat lately from some of the listeners via email or on Twitter because you keep fast forwarding during the women's matches. You
told me that I was not allowed to fast forward during Sasha Banks' match. That's another reason I'm not happy with you this morning, Mr. Last.
Well, the match was fine. The finish is another thing.
Well, but you didn't say I couldn't fast forward through Nikki Cross and Bayley. And besides that, seriously, I don't think anything was going to happen here that was going to set the world on fire that I should either comment on or pick apart. But I will say that I did catch the finish, and Bayley used the fucking gimmick shot to the gut. She put a gimmick on her fist. She punched her opponent in the stomach with the gimmick and then hit a wrestling finish 1, 2, 3. Why didn't she just knock her out with the loaded fucking punch?
I don't have an answer for that.
All right. So up next in this bloody parade of terror, the Firefly Funhouse that somebody once told me, oh, you might really like this. This guy's really weird.
If you're alluding to me, that is not the way I put it. I said you more than likely will not like it. However, you will realize that he has something. He is committed to whatever it is that he's doing. And you may find some of it interesting. They had a Vince McMahon puppet for a while. I thought you may get a kick out of that, but I in no way thought you would like the Firefly Funhouse.
Well, if he had something, he lost it and he needs to be looking for it. Or here's what I wrote. I can't believe they do this shit on purpose. Who likes this? Who watches this? Who writes this? He's doing a great promo if it was a late night horror show host. Shout out to Svengoolie.
See, that's the
Sammy Terry in Indianapolis, the Cool Ghoul in Cincinnati, the Fearmonger in Louisville.
Zachary.
Any of those people. Zachary. Exactly.
You ever hear the story about Zachary and the Grateful Dead?
Which one died first?
No, they brought him out in a coffin. I want to say it was one of their New Year's shows. And he was supposed to pop out of the coffin and say, ladies and gentlemen, the Grateful Dead. And they wheel him out on stage in the coffin. He can't get out of it. Finally, he gets through it and he says, ladies and gentlemen, the fucking Grateful Dead. No, but look, there are so many people that want to be
wait a minute. Hold on. I have a Zachary album, I'll have you know.
Really?
A Zachary album put out in '66 during all the monster merchandising, featuring such hits as his take on the Bristol Stomp called the Pistol Stomp. The kids in Bristol all carry a pistol when they do the Pistol Stomp, and then they fire pistols in the air. Or Hurry, Berry, Baby. It's set to a kind of a jazz beat. It's Hurry, Berry, Baby, ha, gotta dispose of the body. It's a cool album.
You know, there are so many people in wrestling that dream of a career in Hollywood.
Well,
I think Bray Wyatt should be the next person to go to Hollywood, and here's why.
I do too. Get him out of a fucking wrestling ring.
Well, beyond that, he's not especially good as a wrestler in the ring. Like, there are no classic Bray Wyatt matches. However, I don't even want to say he's a great promo because he's doing a completely different thing. He's acting. He does a great show.
Yeah.
He does a great job of being the character he's trying to be. I understand he has a professional wrestling pedigree. Blackjack Mulligan is his grandfather. Mike Rotunda's his dad. Barry Windham's his uncle. But
Blackjack may be spinning in his fucking grave right now.
I think Bray Wyatt should be the next guy to go to Hollywood. Cody Rhodes wishes he could act like this.
Well, maybe not. Maybe act as well as that. Maybe not act like this.
Bray Wyatt, that's a good way of putting it. Bray Wyatt should go to Hollywood. He doesn't belong on a wrestling show any longer, and he's obviously a very talented guy. It's just not in a wrestling ring.
But now, wait a minute. You just said he may not belong on a wrestling show any longer. Well, there was no danger of that on this program because this was not a wrestling show.
Good point.
All right, so the Firefly Funhouse promoted the Swamp match later on in the fucking evening, and then
made fun of them and made fun of their own programming because at one point he said he was going to show some horrible clip, and I didn't even know about this because I don't pay attention to their crap. Apparently they had a women's karaoke contest on SmackDown.
Yeah, there was a clip of that came up, and I didn't see it, but I didn't see the karaoke contest, but I could clearly tell that they were making fun of an awful segment they did on their own show. And then he was talking to the fucking, guy that was operating the shit, saying, "Hey, I know what you're trying to do to me." Oh, and then suddenly it went black and white.
No, he was talking to the rabbit.
It was the wabbit. That wascally wabbit. He was talking to the rabbit. Well, that explains everything. Fuck, we're not even there yet. Then MVP and Lashley did a promo. I've mentioned I know Bobby Lashley was an OVW, like the guy, very nice guy. What an athlete. Look at the size of him. Look at the state of him, as they say over in England. But basically what's the fucking guy's name that they put out of action? The U.S. champion.
Apollo Crews.
Apollo Crews.
And by the way, they didn't put him out of action. Apparently he has COVID-19.
Or he's out of act or whatever. He couldn't be there. So MVP and Lashley come out to the ring. MVP does a promo, says something to Lashley that was supposed to be funny because they both laughed. Declared himself, not Lashley, but MVP himself, the winner of the U.S. title by forfeit over Apollo Crews, and then they left. I thought MVP was Lashley's manager. So wouldn't you take the belt for your guy? Am I overthinking this, or was that just and also was that the flattest ending in the history of an interview where they said something that nobody laughed at except themselves, declared himself the champion, and they walked out unchallenged, unmolested, unbothered. Nobody said, "Oh, you shouldn't do that." Nobody's music played to come out and interrupt, save the day. What the fuck was that?
I have no explanation for it. I had no idea what was going on, or if he now, in fact, was the champion, because the commentators didn't even really address it. I have no idea.
They were like, well, he kind of like, he can't do that, can he? I don't know. Who knows? And by the way, the commentators, Corey Graves and Mahatma Gandhi, what's his, Michael Cole, yes. They were joined by Samoa Joe. Why did they want Samoa Joe to join them on the eye for an eye match when everybody that appeared in this thing was going to come off worse? But couldn't they have just taken Michael Cole and Corey Graves out behind the barn like Old Yeller and shot them after this, because they're of no use to anybody after being a part of this? And then Samoa Joe could have come in with another announcer, and instead of they killed another announcer with this. They didn't have to, because why would you have an announcer for this?
Samoa Joe's the only good announcer they have right now.
Yeah, exactly. So why put him on this fucking shit? Remember, we're supposed to find the silliness and the fun and have fun with this and just make fun of it and make fun of all the silly wrestling. But what the fuck? They did the whole VTR package about this blood feud they've got going on with absolutely nothing in it to make me believe that anybody is really mad or ever has been, especially with the way they've got Seth Rollins doing this blasé delivery of badly scripted verbiage that they give these guys. And I don't know why everybody's so calm and soft-spoken when they're talking, I'm going to gouge your eyeball out. Well, I'll come back and pull your nuts off, and I'll stick them down your trachea until your testicles loll out your fucking dickhead. I dare you. What the fuck? And they actually had the ring announcer. I sounded like that Hannibal guy then. Ooh, and what else did he do then?
Tell me
about the wrestling.
I saw on Wikipedia you were a manager.
Yes, somebody said that so-and-so said bad things about you. What do you think about that? Anyway.
By the way, he is the worst. Let me just throw that in.
Well, I think how much ground that covers. There's always somebody out there that may be worse. We just hadn't found him yet. Anyway, they actually had the ring announcer announce as part of the stipulation, the only way to win is to extract one of your opponent's eyes. All right, we've talked about it. It's been so fucking stupid from the time that they announced this, and everybody laughs at it, and nobody believed it. And, but there was some element of discussion and or wonderment or bewilderment. How are they going to do this, right? That was like, it's like the two dogs fucking. They have taken what I described about Shitstain's booking from years ago and just now apply it to everything. We don't give a fuck what happens. We just want to see how they're going to do it. We don't care about any of these people, and we certainly don't believe that any of this is in any way legitimate, or even that there could be some ill will between these guys like a Bret Hart or a Shawn Michaels that would lead somebody to go into business for themselves. It's just a bunch of bullshit to laugh at. So how are they going to do this? I was even interested. Well, how are they going to do this? One guy going to walk around with no eyeball in his head for the rest of his life? You even made mention, well, it didn't say it had to be detached. But, when you extract one of your opponent's eyes, that kind of is a bait and switch if it could still be attached by the optic nerve. And certainly a fine, upstanding, publicly traded company like the WWE is not going to bait and switch anybody. So this is going to be good, right? Yeah.
And I was right, by the way. You don't have to detach it. It just had to be extracted.
Well,
turns out I was right on the stipulation.
No, I'll extract you. No, nothing got extracted except money out of people's wallets for this fucking... As soon as Seth Rollins on his way to the ring, he pulls a pair of pliers out of his jacket. Did anybody notice that these are goddamn big, like channel lock pliers you would change giant bolts with? He needed needle nose pliers for a fucking eyeball. Did every eyeball I've ever pulled out with a pair of pliers, I had to use needle nose because you can't get in the fucking socket with those bits. So that was the first thing right off the bat that tipped me off that this was phony. Then Ray, I love the old deal where if a babyface has been so wronged by a heel and is so mad that he hits the ring from behind and starts wailing on the fucking heel. Ray came in behind Seth and waited for him to turn around. And then they jump started 100 miles an hour. And at that point, I wrote, what's left to do after the fucking table match? Well, I found out later on some more table shit because, if any world champion before 1990 fucking won, if you had done a spot, any kind of spot with a table, when they were going to use a table in their match, you would have heard about it, potentially while a leg of that table was being whacked over your fucking head. Random observations. When Rey Mysterio flies, at least he flies like a wrestler and not a gymnast. I thought he was really moving good. He's had the knee problems and everything, but he looks like an athlete, even though and the height differential is so, because Seth is 6'3" or 4 or whatever. So it looked good there because the baby face was fucking smaller. But then Ray gets a toolbox. It comes out with a piece of rebar. And Seth Rollins get a kendo stick. I know why the toolbox is under the ring. Why is the kendo stick under the ring? Because it makes a good noise. Every ring crew needs a kendo stick to put the ring up with.
Once again, ECW.
ECW. Yeah, or any Japanese wrestler of the fucking 60s, 70s, and 80s. Tojo Yamamoto had a kendo stick when he managed Fuchi and Onita. I'll let that slide, but why is it under the fucking ring?
Do you remember why the Sandman and ECW started coming out with the kendo stick?
I always assumed because they were marks and liked to hit each other for fucking real that they could do that with the kendo stick and it would only hurt you some instead of ridiculously.
I think it was actually originally a pretty topical thing. Remember there was his name Michael Fay?
The guy that got Singapore cane.
That's right.
Some asshole teenager in Singapore, American teenager, was in Singapore and shoplifted some minor stupid offense, and they fucking cane him because it's in Singapore, and that's what they do. And so Paulie took off with that. But once again, nobody remembers that now. We had to think about it for a minute. So why is there a kendo stick involved in professional wrestling? Nobody explains these things. As a matter of fact, several people on Twitter said, well, the end of NXT the other night, Scarlett brought the bag containing the pieces of the hourglass that Keith Lee himself had broken. Okay, then instead of laying out like it was some dramatic Broadway stage production, that's when your professional announcers should have said when she dumped it out, my God, that's the hourglass that she had herself been timing Adam Cole's reign that Keith Lee broke. Holy shit. That's all it takes. Anyway, with Rey Mysterio and Seth Rollins, when wrestling spots broke out, they performed them at a high level. Then they'd either go back out to the floor, go back to all the gimmicks, and it looks like what everybody else does, because that's everything that everybody else does these days. And when I'm sorry, even in no DQ matches, I learned early on from the veterans, when the heels are getting heat in the no DQ matches, they should still try to cheat behind the referee's back, because visually and subliminally for the people, when somebody is trying to gouge another guy's eye out and the referee's just standing there and staring at it because that's the stipulation of the match, it gets no heat and it just looks stupid. But when somebody's trying to gouge somebody else's eyeball out and the referee's trying to pull them off and doing something about it, there's a sense of urgency, then that gets some heat. And or if the heel is cheating behind the referee's back, even in a no DQ match, that gets more heat, because there's just something about the way the fans are looking at the referee, looking right at it, or nobody trying to help anybody or whatever. The veterans told me this. I've always told everybody I've trained this. Apparently, nobody up there listens to these things. Every time the announcers acted like an eye was really going to come out, it killed it, and it killed them. And they're not even, if ever there was a stipulation that you might have to wink at verbally or with a tone in your voice, and they were playing it overly straight. Like that, they're convinced somebody is going to get their eye pulled out. And as we've mentioned, unless it was a bar fight involving Bill Watts, I don't think so.
And by the way, I thought it was a little ridiculous them going back to doing spots, just regular wrestling spots in the match, where the whole goal is to extract the eye. You don't need to do an Irish whip at that point.
My next note was this went forever. Great wrestling spots. Then they just kept going back to the weapons and the eyes. And it just Mysterio broke the kendo stick and tried to Magnum TA and Tully Seth Rollins, but it didn't have nearly the anything to it. Then Mysterio milks Seth Rollins' eye into the corner of the stairs. I know it's because they did it on television in their previous angle and the angle with Dominic and etc., but can you come up with a more awkward way to put somebody's eye out than to push their face into the corner of a set of steel steps that's so fucking huge that they can literally place their hands on them and fucking push themselves away from them? It's not like you're using a stick or your fucking finger or whatever. It's just so awkward. But at this point, they promised that we'd have nightmares after watching this show, and I'm going to.
They were right.
If I can ever go to sleep again, I'm going to have horrible fucking nightmares. So then, finally, Seth Rollins, and I'm not making this up for the many of you out there who I hope did not have to watch this idiocy. Seth Rollins pushes Rey Mysterio's eye into the corner of the stairs as hard as he can, apparently. But did you notice when he let go, Rey's face, he still held it there. It was like he was impaled or stuck on some kind of nail that was next to the stairs, because Seth lets go of him and he doesn't recoil in fucking pain or freedom or whatever. He just leaves his face leaned in where you can't see the corner of the stair in the eye. You can't see it, but Seth Rollins comes to attack him again, looks down, has a horrified look on his face, backs up and pukes, starts puking at what he has seen. And once I saw what he's seen, I started puking too. And by the way, I did see that actually happen one time for real. That match, me, Adrian Street, and Miss Linda in a lumberjack strap match against Bill Dundee in the Cook Convention Center in Memphis, Tennessee. Dundee throws me so hard out of the ring, I fucking bashed my face into the goddamn apron of the ring on the way down. Busted me open from the cheekbone out. I'm spurting blood about a foot and a half, 2 feet out from my face. Terry Taylor, as one of the lumberjacks with the straps, comes over to whip me and draws back and looks at my face and gets that queasy look and just turns and walks away from me. That's when I knew I was hurt. So it can happen. However, he didn't vomit. What you see then when you go to the shot of Rey Mysterio was Rey on his back with his hand over his eye. And you could tell this. I freeze framed mine. Somebody did a better close-up and put it on Twitter of the freeze frame of the hand over the eye. When we were talking about this, how are they going to do this? How are they going to CGI? Computer generated?
That's the thing.
Cinematic?
I was expecting something.
Special effects, some Tom Savini bullshit, right?
Yeah.
You know what we got? He's got his hand over his face. He's holding a fucking ping pong ball they drew on with a red Sharpie. A ping pong ball they drew on with a red Sharpie. A ping pong ball. The WWE, the worldwide leader in sports entertainment. The cinematic match masters. A ping pong ball and a red Sharpie. And you didn't see it, obviously. They didn't want you to see it after they saw what it looked like. I saw that on the internet. Vince ixnayed the big reveal shot. I wonder why. God, I've seen better special effects and fucking... Oh, my God.
I had people sending me that clip from Friday the 13th, part 3, where the guy's head gets squished by Jason and his eyeball pops out. I'm thinking, I hear CGI. I'm thinking, okay, you know what? I'm not really into this, but maybe they're going to do something so fantastical that I'll sit up. I'll be like, wow, that was something different. This was the most anticlimactic ending to such a garbage gimmick I've ever seen.
There was not blood gushing. There was his hand over his face, and you could see between his fingers on the one freeze frame the ping pong ball with the red Sharpie drawn on it. And then medical personnel come out with a towel. It's like when you used to burn somebody. They'd come out and they'd throw a towel over your head. Like that's what you do with a burn victim, right? But it kept people from seeing it. The guy may not be burned. But in this case, okay, let's say that this guy's eyeball is now hanging out on his cheek, disembodied from his fucking face. And the doctors come out and put a towel on it. And one of the doctors is keep some pressure on it. Put pressure on a popped out eyeball? What would that fucking feel like? You fucking morons. And then they took him to, guess where? A medical facility where the ocular reattachment may have taken. But the fake doctors with the towel over his disembodied eye keep pressure on it, on the popped out eyeball or the popped out ping pong ball. I've seen a video where somebody popped out some ping pong balls, and it was more entertaining than this. I'll tell you that right now. And that was it. And fucking Seth is over there, fucking vomiting his cream of wheat. Vince loves vomit. He's gonna.
Yeah, what is that? Why does Vince have a thing? It's like vomit and defecation and
farts,
urine, and yeah, like, what is that?
Yes, it just because it's South Park.
You can take the boy out of the trailer park, but you can't take the trailer park out of the boy, I'll tell you.
And then later on, the boy comes back and buys the trailer park.
It's funny, too. We don't know if this eye reattachment will take. If Ray signs his contract, his eye will be magically reattached. If he doesn't, he's going to show up on AEW with 2 eyes. So I mean, it's just so stupid.
Yeah. So, these guys could have a great wrestling match. This obviously was not it because, once again, not because of the talent, but because of the stupidity of the creative team, the writers, Vince himself, whoever's fucking behind this, whoever thought this was a good idea, whoever thought that this, unless Vince came up with the whole thing himself and several people resigned, in like a wrestling version of the Saturday Night Massacre before Vince got somebody that would carry it out. This is just ridiculous. So there you have it. An eye for an eye. And we're not even done yet. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a goddamn bowel movement for this show. That's about what it's worth. Bayley was a nice bright spot again, having a little backstage interview about her. I swear to God, the female interviewer asked her about her nefarious victory. She did a nice heel promo about her nefarious victory. Then they did a promotional swamp match video. The swamp, apparently where they hire their fucking writers. And Braun Strowman and Bray Wyatt were both doing their spooky voiceovers over the horror movie video. And I've got to think that the writers they all sit in their room and they just giggle and glee and they tap on their little laptops. By the way, I've never booked a goddamn 1 second of wrestling on a fucking laptop and don't ever intend to start now. These fuckers, we had books and pads and pencils and erasers and paper piled up all around us. These little fucking fairies have their goddamn little laptops and their little ties on in their little writers' meetings, and they just love to do shit like this, where they can actually bypass the wrestling entirely and just have these characters that they've created in their heads come to life, courtesy of the performers portraying them. And I would like to have a goddamn auger, one of those big old augers that you could just about drill for oil with, turn it at a high rate of speed, and have each one of those take a Jackie Fargo atomic drop right on the end of that bit and see their goddamn intestines spun around like goddamn July 4th fireworks, every single one of the fucking writers, just so we make that plain. So, in this video, both Braun Strowman and Bray Wyatt agreed to go home to the swamp that the Wyatt family has in their backyard, and they both laughed while I cried and died a little bit inside. And later, but we're not yet ready for the swamp match yet. No, Ed Wood will meet Toby Hooper later on in the program, ladies and gentlemen, because we now have, wish somebody'd wear an Angora sweater. We have another women's championship match, because now the partner of the girl that won the belt, the women's belt earlier in the show, gets to go for another fucking belt. And Sasha versus Asuka. And I was not allowed to fast forward through any Sasha Banks matches, according to Brian Last, because the people get up in arms. They wanted an evaluation. So here's my evaluation. A good girls match is like being the nicest guy in prison. There's something to be said for it, but it's not a huge honor.
Oh, come on.
This was a good girls match. I'll tell you, I can name 2 great women's matches right off the top of my head that I've seen over the last couple of years. And that was the 2 best matches with female performers. Ronda Rousey's WrestleMania debut, and Stephanie was in that, and they carried it off along with old Trips and Angle. And Charlotte and Rhea Ripley from WrestleMania this past year, which was probably the best wrestling match on WrestleMania, either night of WrestleMania, in terms of actually being an athletic competition and even making it no fans a bonus instead of a detriment. This was neither of those things. This was everything the AEW women's roster tries to be and can't. They're well-trained, they're in shape, they work hard, they know how to work. But once again, it's still 200-pound girls having a match, placed halfway through a stinky, obviously phony wrestling show, and then doing so much that are they leaving anything else for anybody else? They started this show with 4 guys and 22 tables and then put this on halfway. All the fans love Sasha Banks, by the way, right? They think she's great.
Yeah, we hear a lot of people who do. And of course, we got some criticism because you skipped her match on NXT a few weeks ago.
Well, here's another thing. All the fans love Sasha Banks. You've just said this. And we know this to be true because they say it. She's the heel. They love her. She's the heel. It's the Tammy Sunny syndrome. When I had Tammy Fitch in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, we dressed her up in her preppy college outfits where she went to her exclusive all-girls school that was Hillary Clinton's alma mater, and she had that New Jersey accent, and she talked above everybody's head, and she made fun of everybody's hygiene and their manner of speaking, and she cheated and sprayed heels and her baby faces in the face with her mace and her purse and lied and blah, blah, blah. She had more heat than I did. Women legitimately physically attacked her on more than one occasion, and the cops kept a couple of guys from doing the same thing. They hated her fucking guts, and she was a main event attraction because she had enough heat that you could put heels with her and they would get heat from her, like every great manager. And she could be figured into the top matches, not just if she'd have been a girl wrestler, she'd have been in a match on the card, maybe. What they did when she got up there was they stripped away the entire persona, stopped letting, because Tammy Fitch was Tammy Fitch was an offshoot of Tammy Sitch, somewhat. It was natural. She did a very good job at it. They make her the fucking bobbing up and down fucking smiling blonde girl with the exercise guy, the body donnas, put her in a skimpy outfit showing some skin, and put him in the middle of the card where nobody had any heat anyway. And the people went berserk over. They loved her. And then, of course, she overshadowed everybody in the matches because she's a top star now, but with no place to go. What can you do with her? You can't put her with the heels anymore because they're cheering the fuck out of her just because she's beautiful and they don't care about the rest of the guys in the fucking matches. So you try to put her with the top baby faces. Why do the baby faces need this girl with them? She was the most downloaded AOL celebrity when that first became a thing, but we ended up having to take her off the cards completely and just send her around to do the press appearances and the fucking on-sale ticket dates and stuff because she was a personality that we couldn't plug into the wrestling show in any kind of story way. She had to be the Super Soaker commercial or the fucking whatever the fuck. She was a celebrity. She was a personality. They loved her. There's no place in the business at that time for a girl that they loved, and she couldn't be a heel, which she was great at. Because nobody believed in it anymore. So, Sasha Banks is the heel. All the guys love her because she's pretty and she's a girl. It's a fuck. How long did this match go?
I can't tell you that. Again, I was told this pay-per-view was only 2.5 hours. It felt a lot longer to me, so I have no gauge on time here.
It was very close to 2.5 hours. Well, at least Moolah only went 7 minutes. But I wrote, sadly, this is also the best match so far because it's an actual wrestling match without tables and fucking, whatever and pulling eyeballs out. Asuka hit a drop kick off the top rope, but Sasha looked like she was trying to sidestep it, but it knocked her down anyway. So then she didn't sell it and hit a false finish. And at that point, I took a break to shave. I hadn't shaved since the start of the fucking program. They carefully helped themselves get into position for a German suplex off the top rope by Asuka, but nobody sold it. Asuka Germaned Sasha. Sasha turned over and landed on her hands and knees. Asuka took the bump on the back of her head and popped right back up so that Sasha could hit her with something. And then Sasha tried something and slipped and fell off the fucking ropes. And then in the finish, everything fell apart. Bayley distracted. The referee got buried. Then Bayley threw one of the belts in. The referee, instead of throwing it right back out, picks it up and walks it over to the corner and stands there and turns his back forever while Bayley gets in the ring 10 feet away from him. And at this point, you can't even say you couldn't hear this because of the fucking crowd, because there is no crowd, right? She uses the belt. Everybody interfered. Asuka comes up. No, Asuka accidentally misted the referee. Then Bayley used the belt while the referee was blind. Then Bayley took the referee's shirt off, counted the 1, 2, 3 pin for her partner Sasha over Asuka, and they took the belt and left.
And the bell rang.
And the bell rang. The bell rang when the manager put the referee shirt on. That instantly makes them a referee, and so everybody went along with this. You made me watch this for that. I could have fast-forwarded this too and been so much happier.
I made you watch it because we're hearing from a lot of people that are upset that you keep fast-forwarding only during the women's matches.
Well, and that's going to be a fucking trend that will continue after what I've seen here tonight. Until I see me some Rhea Ripley, and I know, and Charlotte is out of action now, I understand, so it's going to be few and far between. And Becky Lynch, we know, is on the shelf. So I'd watch her. She's over. Anyway.
I forget now. What else was on this show? Other than the main event. I don't know if we call that the main event, but other than the swamp fight, was there anything else?
Well, you forgot about the other world title. They had another world title match.
Wow. You're right. I did forget about that. That's right.
Because there's so many. Everybody is a world champion. They multiple. I think back to what Vince McMahon or Hulk Hogan would have said in 1986 if somebody had come up with the idea. Yeah, let's have 2 champions. Fuck. And I'm not knocking any of them, but just have one for fuck's sake. But another world title match with poor Drew McIntyre, who's probably the guy who's come out the worst of the COVID thing because his big coronation and everything else has been in front of no people, against poor old Dolph Ziggler, who's probably the best performer on the show. But already we put a hat on a hat. Again, I'm loving that expression because so the match, Dolph gets to name the rules of this match. So he names the rules that it's no disqualification for him only. And if he wins by count out or disqualification, he wins the belt. So they've gimmicked this up too. And the whole story of this thing has been that Dolph Ziggler is no physical match for Drew McIntyre and he's going to kill him. And that's what he fucking did through the whole goddamn. Dolph Ziggler bounced like a ping pong ball. He channeled Kurt Hennig. He had to post Drew McIntyre into the steel post to take over for a second and pulls out a table. We haven't seen that before tonight. Then McIntyre will just take back over and continue to kick Dolph Ziggler's ass. Dolph kick him in the balls in the front of the referee because he can. But once again, that's flat because it's very hard to have a match where you have the heel has all these stipulations and just set it up in that bullshit way where, okay, he announces it and they ring the bell and they go do it. If they were going to do this to sell it ahead of time might have created some mystery over the fact that maybe Dolph Ziggler is going to win. Wouldn't you think? But once you're telling the people that are already there, you're preaching to the choir. That is the definition of preaching to the choir. When you're telling people something when they're already there that maybe more of them would have come if they'd have known ahead of time. Am I overthinking this?
Well, I mean, everyone knew the outcome. No one thought Dolph Ziggler was going to win the title from Drew McIntyre. Nobody.
You could still try just as a booking exercise to do it right, even if you've chosen the wrong people to do it with. And that's not knocking Dolph Ziggler, because like I said, he's the best worker on the whole show. He throws 4 chairs in the ring and hits fucking McIntyre full steam 6 times and gets a 2 count. And then McIntyre rolls out on the floor and belly-to-bellies Dolph over the fucking desk. Dolph Ziggler hits a Fameasser off the desk onto the McIntyre on the floor, and McIntyre gets right back in the ring and is right back on offense. There were parts of a good match in all of this, and Dolph Ziggler is phenomenal, but the stipulation was goofy once again, poorly thought out, and poorly presented. Then Dolph Ziggler comes off the top rope with an off-the-top turnbuckle to the floor with an elbow to Drew McIntyre through a table, another one. Why did they have a tables match and then in the world title match, they've got a table spot? What the fuck? And then Drew McIntyre beats count back in the ring. Dolph hits 5 finishes in 10 seconds and gets a 2 count. Then cleans all the chairs out of the ring and tunes up a super kick, and McIntyre hits him with one fucking kick out of nowhere, 1, 2, 3. Thanks for coming. What the fuck? What the ever-loving fuck? That was a world title match against somebody who did not in any way, shape, or form deserve a world title match, is the way that they told that story, even though the best worker on the show was the guy that they were portraying as being ineffectual. And are they just that short on real challengers for poor Drew McIntyre, who's now being, fed the Joe Louis Bum of the Month Club?
Maybe. I mean, the other philosophy, and I doubt this would be what they're doing because it makes sense, is that maybe they don't want to put too many top heels against Drew McIntyre right now until they can have audiences again. But with that said, Dolph Ziggler has been misused his entire career. From naming him Dolph Ziggler to the Spirit Squad, time and time again, an extremely talented guy. He's one of those guys I wish would have left WWE several years ago and gone to New Japan, or gone to Ring of Honor, or worked the Indies. And it's a shame that he's still there and they still use him the way. I mean, at this point, they can't use him a different way. They're going to use him one way, and that's it. And
I think at this point, I think he's probably just happy getting his money and doing his thing every once in a while when they let him, or elsewise he would have fucking choked somebody and left at this point. But he a tremendous worker. Occasionally, he'll go too far on the Shawn Michaels overbumping just because he's having fun doing it. A little Kurt Hennig in there too, but and gosh, wonder where he got trained from scratch originally. His introduction into wrestling. OVW? Son of a gun. Yeah, just not under that name. Anyway, you know what we got left?
Oh, I know.
All right, you can get mad at me a little bit on this one. I'm going to tell you when I left it, when they lost me. The swamp fight match closed this sad chapter in American wrestling history. Bray Wyatt and Braun Strowman, and Corey Graves' pitch to this match, I think, summed up the whole thing. He actually said, and I quote, "The question on everyone's mind, what sort of unforeseen terror is lurking beneath the surface of the brackish waters?"
That was on everyone's mind.
And, if this was a Universal International picture from 1957, or possibly a William Castle production from the 60s, maybe maybe they could have even had like a fucking tingler thing on our seats, wired to our seats, where every time that the fucking, you saw a snake in the swamp, you felt something bite you or whatever. That'd be a William Castle fucking gimmick. Because there wasn't anything to do with wrestling in this. It's all movies. They're frustrated fucking movie actors, movie writers, movie producers. And now we know why they're frustrated, because they're not any fucking good at it. So it opens with Bray Wyatt in a rocker rocking in the middle of the swamp when Braun Strowman pulls up in his SUV. And I hope it's not a rental, because it voids your insurance if you're driving in the swamp. At least it hurts. Braun Strowman says, "I'm home," and then the lights go out. The lights go out in a swamp. That happens to me all the time whenever I go down to the swamp. The lights went out, and when the lights came back on, Bray Wyatt had disappeared. And right then, I was going to invoke the teleportation rule. But I thought, okay, I'm not going to, because first off, we're not supposed to take this seriously. This is wrestling, supposed to be silly and fun. And secondly, he didn't actually teleport. The lights were out. He could have gotten up and walked off. We'll just discuss the loophole of how the lights got turned off in a swamp at a later date. So then they start the spooky music and the movie fight. And during them fighting, it cut to a clip of Bray Wyatt in the funhouse cheering Braun Strowman on while Bray Wyatt was fighting Braun Strowman in the swamp. And then Braun Strowman, I'm not making this up, ladies and gentlemen. Am I lying about any of this?
No, you're telling the truth about exactly what sort of garbage we saw.
Okay, Braun Strowman gets hit from behind by a shovel and goes down and looks up and he sees who hit him. Brian, you don't have to guess because you saw it, but just for the sake of me saying this for the people that may not have seen this fucking four-finger stinker, this goddamn back alley abortion of a wrestling program, who hit Braun Strowman? Guess who hit Braun Strowman, folks? I'll tell you who hit Braun Strowman. Braun Strowman hit Braun Strowman. He looks up and sees Braun Strowman with the shovel because of he's a mental goddamn case. I don't know why, because. And right then, I couldn't find the remote. And I got to see that Braun Strowman woke up after being knocked out with the shovel, chained to a chair in a cabin. Or as New Jack once said, chained in the bowels of a slave ship. Braun Strowman was chained to a chair in a log cabin. And that's when I said, I'm done. Fuck these guys. Fuck these alleged writers. Fuck this whole company. This would have made me ashamed to ever be a part of wrestling, but this isn't wrestling. So I'm not ashamed to have ever been a part of wrestling. I would have been ashamed to ever be a part of whatever the fuck these people just did. And they should be ashamed to call themselves wrestlers. But it didn't make me ashamed of wrestling because there was no aspect of wrestling involved in this. If Vince likes it, he needs to take that cognitive test that old fucking President Pig Shit has taken, where he can identify the elephant from the donkey. Or if Bruce was in favor of this, I think he's been to rehab before. Somebody needs to fucking check and see if Bruce is falling off the wagon. Or potentially, it may be that you know, he's had bad health. Maybe he's on some kind of heart medicine that's causing him to have psychotic episodes. Maybe he's on that hydrochloroquine. Braun Strowman, I'm pretty sure we've established, is a fucking idiot and would have never made it 15 minutes in the real wrestling business because he'd understand how it worked or how it's supposed to work. Bray Wyatt, I think I'm the most disappointed in of all of them because, as I mentioned before, Blackjack Mulligan, I only met him a few times, but from what Ric Flair and other people have told me about him, he would be spinning in his grave right now at the thought of his business being portrayed in this way. So what else happened after he was chained in the cabin and I said, fuck this, I'm done? Was there anything else of note?
Of note, it's hard to say. At some point, a guy came out and attacked Braun Strowman after he got out of the chair. Don't know who the guy is, but then he was lit on fire and he ran off in flames.
Wait a minute, Braun Strowman or the guy
No, the stunt man that they hired to be a generic Bray Wyatt disciple.
Ran off in flames.
I gotta be honest, I didn't turn it off like you did, but I just stopped caring and stopped paying close attention. So every now and then I would look up. The end of the pay-per-view had Braun Strowman, I don't know if it was a raft or a little boat, but he's on the water and the little credits come up, you know, copyright World Wrestling Entertainment or whatever.
They didn't do the goddamn Friday the 13th body out of the fucking water.
Oh, that's exactly what they did.
Fucking hell.
And then Bray Wyatt jumped out of the water, pulling him into the water, and then the water all went red.
And so did their ink. As soon as they aired this, and people started canceling their network subscriptions. Fuck. So that was that. An eye for an eye. I think we've put to bed now, or put to rest, any accusations that have been cast our way that we favor the WWF over AEW, when in actuality, neither one of them worth a fucking shit. Neither one of them are worth a pot to piss in or a window to throw it out of.
I will tell you this. I find AEW, and again, I killed them this past week. I hated that show on Wednesday night last week. They are much less offensive than WWE to a wrestling fan.
Well, okay, the way you phrased that, I will agree with that. Because AEW is still more offensive to me as a wrestling professional because of I can't say the word talent, because the individuals that they put on national television that are so woefully not ready and look so outlaw and do such goofy shit. It offends me more as a wrestling professional, but I can see where to just an average fan, it might be easier to watch just because you can laugh at it more instead of just shaking your head. I shook my head more. I didn't laugh at anything on this show. It was all just stupid, and what was supposed to be funny wasn't funny. And it was offensive with the eye thing and the whole 9 yards, just cheating people, promising them something you didn't deliver. But nothing's silly or just completely obviously they do obviously phony shit, but they act like they mean it. I don't know which is worse. The guys that are doing obviously phony, stupid shit and trying to act like they mean it, or the guys on the other channel doing the obviously phony shit and laughing while they're doing it because nobody takes it seriously to begin with. I pick it. I don't fucking know.
I think this is worse. This is much worse. The eye for the eye, the swamp fight, Bayley deciding she's the referee and the title seemingly, or at least her friend wins. I don't even remember if there was a title on the line in that match. The other match had a title on.
Oh, no, there was a title on the line in every match.
There was a title on the line in the MVP match. Guy didn't show up, so MVP just walked off with the belt. This whole show was a train wreck. And it is another piece of evidence that Vince McMahon is shot and that Bruce Pritchard is there just to enable this shot old man to continue to stay on top of this company, where everyone in the company or out of the company knows the best thing for the WWE right now would be new management. Because the ratings are down, there's nothing they could point to as a metric that says, you know what, Vince is doing a good job. There's nothing. And in terms of, you can't base wrestling on critical acclaim because people who are smart fans sometimes like things that work. Sometimes they dislike things that work. But this is just...
That's why whenever you see a smart fan that suddenly gets his own company and gets to book, that's why you get some of the things you get.
That's right. But this is garbage. This is complete and utter garbage. And I don't know how anyone could like it. I don't know how anyone could support it. If it wasn't a business expense for me, I wouldn't have the WWE Network and I wouldn't watch any of this crap.
You know what? I don't even write it off because I'm so ashamed to let anybody know I actually have it.
It's awful. Just awful. Awful. What a brain trust they have up there.
I thought you were going to try to make me feel better. You're making me feel worse. The fact that AEW can be a better professional wrestling program than anything ought to right there tell you we might as well just fold our fucking tent. Might as well just pack it up and go home. Nobody's even trying anymore. But
more shareholders need to get upset at the way WWE is being run. More shareholders need to speak out and tank that stock for the message to get through. Shameful. Just awful, awful. Television? By the way, their ratings are in the toilet. There's a reason for that. It's not just COVID-19. It's some of the worst television anyone has ever produced. Not just for wrestling, but for television. And even if you want to do some weird cinematic David Lynch style wrestling match, if this is the best you can come up with, because you know what, the Undertaker AJ match, not my thing, but that was done well for what it was.
It worked for what it was and because of who was involved. And this swamp thing was the second Tupelo concession stand brawl a year later that yielded very little in the way of results.
It was the second worst swamp thing I've ever seen.
Goddamn, that first one wasn't too fucking good, that swamp thing. Anyway.
That's exactly right. Awful. Just awful. I apologize to AEW for killing them so hard last week. The show still sucked, but this was a whole new level of suck. The likes of which hopefully we never see again, but we will. Because it's Vince McMahon and his toady, Bruce Pritchard, running a creative team that produces shit like this. Because this is what they think Vince wants. Awful. Garbage.
But now will AEW take the challenge? Will it take the handoff of the baton and say, no, just like Vince said last week? No way, pal. I can top this. Will they find a way to top this and be even stinkier and rottener? We'll have to find out.
We'll see if Chris Jericho has any more creative input. That may steer that one direction or another.
Speaking of people being miserable in a group, such as the viewers of this program, the town of Minden, West Virginia, almost the entire town has cancer, and they still are happy that they did not watch an eye for an eye, Extreme Rules, WWE. We've talked about it before. Minden, West Virginia, a town of like 250 people that has been victimized by greed and avarice by one of the big major mining companies up there. What did they do when they had to they were done with the mine? They were finished with it. They closed it up, and what did they put inside the mine? These transformers with these toxic chemicals that leached into the groundwater, into the water supply of this town, and almost everybody in the whole town now has cancer. And they didn't realize what was going on until it was too late, and they found out, and now they've had to go to be able to get justice, to be able to get compensated, to be able to get recompense for being damaged and their lives disrupted, in some cases destroyed. They've had to go to one man, one bright, shining knight in armor who can defend an individual or even an entire town against the greed of modern corporate America.
Call Stephen P. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. Still to the rest.
Stephen P. New, fresh back from Minden, West Virginia, where they had a big meeting down there. It was a socially distanced, mask-wearing meeting. I think they even held it outside, but Stephen is representing this town in the fight of their lives against this huge corporation that basically poisoned these people and walked away from them. If he can take care of a whole town, he's like one of those Old West gunfighters. When the bad people, when the bad guys rode into town shooting up the saloon and feeling up Miss Kitty and all that stuff. What did they do? They found a Marshall Dillon. They found a gunfighter. They found a gunslinger they could bring in, somebody to defend their honor, and that's what this town of Minden, West Virginia has made out of Stephen P. New. And if he can defend a whole town, he can sure defend your little scrawny ass against whatever or whoever may have damaged you or your family or your social circle. NewLawOffice.com, 888-692-8084. When you see Stephen P. New walking through the swinging doors of the Saloon of Justice, you'll know that the gunfight is soon to be at hand and that your man is quicker on the draw. Stephen P. New, NewLawOffice.com, 888-692-8084. If you need to sue, call Stephen P. New.
That's right. And in the meantime, before we sue the WWE for the garbage that they disseminated this past week.
The damage was not done to the eye of the guy in the eye for an eye match. The damage was done to all of our eyes that had to fucking behold that sight.
I said it. I wish it was my eye. I wish they took my eye out so I didn't have to watch that crap.
My goddamn die, Lance.
Well, let's get some questions, Jim. Of course, there are some big things happening in the world of wrestling. Let's ask about a few of these topical issues first. Have you, because I know you're not on social media as much as you've been in the past because you are so busy, so I don't know what you see.
Well, and also it's that new Twitter layout, and it jumps all around on my computer, and it just distracts my eyes. I don't enjoy it as much as the old one.
Did you hear that Joey Ryan released a video, a 58-minute video, attempting to explain himself and deny certain charges against him, or charges may not be the correct word, certain accusations that have been made about him? This is the first anyone's heard from little Mr. Meehan in quite a while. What do you know about this? What do you think about this?
I saw that it was 58 minutes, and I saw a freeze frame of it. I said, I'm not going to listen to that whiny voice for 30 seconds. And I've heard a lot of people say that he basically took an hour to get on YouTube and tell everybody that he was a big celebrity and everybody else was in the wrong. That's about what I know about it.
That's pretty much it. That's pretty much it.
You know, they say nothing good ever happens in wrestling anymore, but at least if we never have to see anybody thrown across the ring by someone's dick, it's been a good year. And so far it's been, even with all the other stuff, just to get rid of that pestilence, that plague on the pasture of pro wrestling, it's a good, and nobody will ever do that spot again. That's not going to get stolen and used widely around the wrestling world. Nobody, that one's pretty much got to be retired at this point.
It is interesting. Professional wrestling is so unique. I can't think of too many businesses like this where someone is thrown out of the business for clear misconduct and they don't go. They still, because they have nothing else and they have no job skills, they still try to find a way to be associated with wrestling, not realizing it's over. Because for Joey Ryan, it's over. No one could ever book him again, even his friends. And he still has friends and supporters out there, shockingly. But it's over.
And after all, what would an athlete be without his supporter?
It's over for him. There's no coming back from this. He could shave and do a 58-minute YouTube video talking in an extremely disingenuous manner. You could say
no, wait a minute. That was highly rehearsed and polished and probably written by some of the contributors to the fine WWE Studios productions.
I don't know about that. It was shot in a very dirty-looking kitchen.
Hey, the guy's had issues. He hadn't had time to clean his kitchen. No, you know, I don't. As long as Joey Ryan, we don't have to see him in a wrestling ring anymore. I don't care what the cause is. It was embarrassing and it was a fucking shame, and it always has been, and I'm surprised people tolerated him that long. And from what I've heard from a number of people who have known him for a while, they're surprised as well that people tolerated him for that long. And, you know, as far as his charges and accusations, I don't know anything about it. I don't care whether he's guilty or innocent or whatever, as long as we do not have to see that half-baked brown and serve roll covered in pubic hair attempting to be a professional wrestler. And now we need to line up a bunch more of these. I don't know if any of them are guilty of misconduct, but boy, they sure ought to be run out of town on a rail for bad wrestling.
What do you think about the idea that this little dirtbag now says that obviously he's been in therapy for a little while, ever since his marriage blew up, and I wonder whose fault that was, but also that he has reconnected with God?
Oh, well, there you go. What did I say about Shawn Michaels? It's always the same. As soon as somebody fucks up so bad that nobody on earth wants to talk to them, they start having a real close relationship with God. And that's supposed to make them a babyface. No, all that makes you to me is somebody who either deludes themselves into believing that there's this fictitious man, invisible man in the sky who's going to make your life better, or you're lying again, trying to babyface yourself to people because, well, if I'm on God's side and God's with me, they can't say anything bad about me. Well, I can, because there is no fucking God. Just get the fuck away from us.
Now, another part of this video, besides the accusations, where he goes through all these accusations, and there's so many of them, talking about what he thought versus what all of these women thought happened. By the way, I take the women's side on these. He also says that apparently in his Impact contract, it said he couldn't be fired for anything he did before signing with Impact.
Wait, what?
According to Joey Ryan, his contract with Impact stated, I'm going to try to find an exact quote here. Impact never reached out to him. He claims his contract says Impact could not release him for anything that took place before signing. And he says all these accusations happened before he signed with Impact.
Wait, okay, first of all, I've worked for the WWF, NWA, WCW, Ring of Honor, TNA. I've done contracts and I've signed contracts and I've had guys sign contracts. I've never seen a contract in wrestling that says, oh, we can't fire you for anything you've done before you started here. I've never seen that. And how would you bring that up? Hey, when you're doing my contract, make sure you write it in there that you can't fire me for anything I've done up till now. What the fuck? That's insane. Why would you put that in a contract if you were a company? Why would you ask for it if you were a wrestler without throwing a red flag? Why would you agree to it if you were a company? Why would something like that ever even come up? I've never heard of that before in my life. And if that's something they did just for him, wouldn't you have smelled something cooking if somebody asked for that?
It will be something if he decides to sue Impact, because you have to think of it this way. What position there was no other position they could take. They can't have this guy back ever again. They can't feature him on their TV show. He's done. He has to understand he's done. Even with his little Southern California buddies. He's done. He's finished.
Done. As Gorilla Monsoon used to say, stick a fork in him. That would have been good anyway, even if he hadn't been cooked first. Stick a fork in him.
The Young Bucks edited every Joey Ryan clip off of their Being the Elite show. They went back, because again,
everyone they've ever done?
Every single thing they've ever had him on. Apparently he was on a bunch of those shows. And remember,
fuck, what do they got, a full-time staff of editors for their little YouTube fucking play show?
They're only working one night a week. I mean,
well,
they have plenty of time.
Yeah.
But remember, they propped him up. All these guys rallied around him when people like you were coming out and saying what a piece of garbage he was and how awful what he was doing was. They had penis druids on All In to celebrate Joey Ryan. I think a lot of people need to look in the mirror and realize they were ignoring a lot of things that other people knew was going on and people like me heard rumors about a while ago. But
a lot of people saying it. I don't know.
Goodbye, Joey Ryan. Good luck.
Anyway,
working at McDonald's or whatever it is you're going to be doing until someone shows up there, realizes who you are, and points out what you've done. Let's get another question here on the show.
Hey, would you like having him hand your fucking bag of McDonald's out the window and, oh, there's the dick guy. Holy Christ.
Another hot button issue lately that we talked briefly about this past week on The Experience is Chris Jericho and Sebastian Bach. This has continued.
It got worse, didn't it?
It got worse. Now, some people think it may be a work. We will find out if it is or isn't, if Sebastian Bach ends up on the COVID cruise when Chris Jericho does it next year.
The COVID cruise.
But in the meantime, Chris Jericho on Saturday...
You know, I bet you there are going to be a bunch of dumb, stupid fuckers that get on a cruise ship and slobber all over each other for that deal. I bet you they will.
They announced Ted DiBiase is going to be on that cruise, but I think he may just be trying to flee. I'm not sure.
Oh, woo!
This past week, Chris Jericho put out a video on Saturday of him singing a Skid Row song.
I saw that.
Unfortunately, I think it reinforced the opinion that Chris Jericho can't sing and that he's doing a parody of 80s hair metal.
That's what I was going to... Okay, I'm not a graduate of the Juilliard School of Music, but it occurred to me that Chris Jericho put that video up responding to people saying he couldn't sing by giving them ample evidence that he couldn't sing. Was that good singing?
It was
awful. I mean, it's not for me to say, but was that good singing?
Garbage. It was horrible. It was a parody. I mean, it seemed like a parody, someone spoofing hair metal but it wasn't a spoof.
But was he doing that? Was he parodying Sebastian Bach? This is the way you sound because you can't sing.
No.
Or was he?
Listen, no matter what side anyone's on here, no one is disputing the fact that Sebastian Bach can sing. He can sing. He is legit. That's probably why he's so offended by Chris Jericho.
So Jericho was legitimately doing this like, look, I'm comparable here with what I heard. I guarantee you every stray dog in a neighborhood had a brain aneurysm at the same time.
So Jericho did that to defend himself. Meanwhile, Sebastian Bach is up the ante. Sebastian Bach tweeted out, "What does someone have to do to get a response out of the most amazing singer of all time, Chris Jericho? I've been trying to get a response from this vocalist who is so much better than I am. Just ask him, he will tell you. Hey, Chris Jericho, I'm here right now. Teach me how to sing. You're so much of a better singer than I am. I'm ready to learn." At this point, a fan named Martu replied, "Hey, Sebastian, morning here. Look, it's okay if you want to do this. You have all the right. But here, all people love you." This isn't proper English. "Here, all people love you for your amazing voice, career, and cause you are a good man. I just maybe want you to read all the good vibe comments for you. Always with you. Take care." Sebastian replied, "Thank you. I'm actually bored. I've never lost a fight. Chris Jericho thinks he's so tough and such a great singer. Come and fight me. I'm 6'4". Have at it."
Oh, shit.
Sebastian then tweeted out private messages that he sent to Chris Jericho. "Hey, man, do you ever suck?" I gotta stop right there.
Oh, God.
Nice video online. What a complete joke. You are a complete talentless fuck. Get your own shit. Yeah, that's what it says. Get your own shit and quit copying me, buddy. Your singing sucks. You should stop singing for the benefit of all mankind.
Oh, my God.
Is this still your number, pussy? I accept your challenge to a singing match if you accept my challenge to whooping your ass. Excuse me, to your fucking ass match. Whooping your fucking ass match.
I was about to say, I don't know if he's challenging him to an ass match.
Believe me, it won't be much of a match unless you bring a phone book to stand on or or something, you fucking pussy.
Oh, my Jesus Christ.
Oh, he's walking the dog on Chris Jericho, Jim. What do you think of this?
What is there? Has Chris come back with anything, or is he just taking this drubbing?
I think Chris has just taken this drubbing. I have not seen any response other than his attempt at singing that he released on Saturday.
Well, there you now. Right now, I'm more interested in Sebastian Bach versus Chris Jericho than anything on AEW or the WWE. That could be a standalone pay-per-view. Have Don King promoted if they didn't want to get in the wrestling business. Just
if he can cut a promo anywhere near as good as he could type a promo,
yeah,
he is money.
Yeah, you could draw some money with that.
What do you do if you're a wrestler and you're public? I mean, you never had this happen in the territory days where there was social media and someone could just call out a wrestler. But what is the proper response here? He is just calling out Chris Jericho.
Well, there was newspapers. Sometimes, people would call out wrestlers if they got a bug in their bonnet on a regional basis. Some athlete in some sport who had a bug in his bonnet about wrestling, there was things would be said. The protocol was, depending on who was in the verbal beef, either ignore it, try to get the guy to work with you, or just try to sucker the guy into letting the wrestler beat the fuck out of him. But I don't see really how they're going to have a resolution of this unless it is a work, because I don't think Sebastian Bach wants to work with Chris Jericho. It doesn't sound like. I think he just wants to fight him, and that could be interesting. We'll see. They're both 50, right?
Give or take, yeah.
They're just a little younger than me. That could be interesting. There's even physical similarities from what I've seen in the side-by-side pictures, separated at birth.
Well, I think that's one of Sebastian's complaints, is that Jericho's trying to copy him. You are such a joke. I can't wait to kick the shit out of you just for fun. Hey, shrimp.
Good God. Holy Jesus Christ.
Hey, shrimp. Why don't you text me back, you fucking asshole? Pussy. I'm sick and tired of your copycat bullshit. So there it is right there. Wow. Someone give him a mic. I want to hear him talk now.
Hey, Skid Row Deathmatch. I'm telling you. That's something we need to see. I'll buy that.
Now, last week on AEW, Jericho mentioned the demos and how AEW, even when they lose by a lot sometimes, the overall number of viewers, they win that demo. A lot of people thought it was kind of silly to mention that on TV. It kind of showed that this has gotten to Chris Jericho. We saw that it got to Tony Khan. He tweeted out about it.
And also it's gotten down to this, that you have to brag about having more people in a certain age group than the other program that just beat you in total number of viewers. And there's a lot of people, well, Cornette doesn't understand how television works. It's all about the demo. Yeah, I don't understand how TV works, you dumb fucks. I'm not talking about whether the network is happy with their advertising. I'm talking about when you got a show available in 100 million homes and you can't get but 600,000 or 700,000 people to watch it, you got a pretty shitty fucking show. That's just, I'm sorry. Remember when Ole Anderson got the 7:30 a.m. Saturday morning time slot on TBS from Ted Turner
on Saturdays?
On Saturdays, when Ted felt bad about Vince getting the fucking regular time slot, he gave Ole an hour on Saturday morning at 7:30. Ole's hour on Saturday morning at 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific was drawing more viewers than AEW is now. Just for comparison's sake. This is why I'm not impressed with any of these fucking made up or fucking fumbled numbers.
Well, considering Jericho's reaction to the ratings talk, do you think he's going to be singing this week on Dynamite? Do you think he's going to come out there and say, well, people say I can't sing, watch this?
You know, actually, he should do a concert and have somebody break the fucking guitar over his head, or he break the guitar over somebody else's head. But if he was that's another reason I feel bad for Drew McIntyre because of the pandemic. The best thing that Chris had going, the fucking sing along with all the people of Judas, was cool, even though he's a heel and everybody's out there, blowing him and fondling his testicles. He's supposed to be a heel, but still it was a cool thing that they started doing and that people, picked up on and kept going with, and now they can't even do that. I bet he's like, motherfucker, right? That was a fucking cool deal. So I don't know, maybe he and Sebastian Bach should join forces, and maybe if they could dig Greg Allman up, they could do a trio and go out and, the fucking bleach blonde, looked like we've been floating in the river for 3 days crew.
All right, I didn't expect you to bring Greg Allman into the mix here.
Well, I'm just, he's probably sprier now than either one of these guys.
Well,
I should say that.
Well, Jim, one other big hot button issue this past week was apparently there was a podcast. I think it was a podcast. Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson with AJ Styles talking about the departure from the WWE of Gallows and Anderson. Did you hear anything about this?
Yes, I did. Well, I heard that they told the evolution of how Triple H kept, offering more money and trying to get him to sign and saying he'll fix them up for the rest of their life and blah, blah, blah. And, I mean, I've commented on AJ thinking that Paul Heyman was a liar, which is like somehow somebody's just discovered that water is wet. And I've said that if I was Anderson and Gallows and I got promised $750,000 a year for 5 years and that lasted for 3 months, that I'd be in prison trying to find the fucker that screwed me around on that deal. But especially now to hear the level of pursuit that they just had to sign him, and they kept offering more money and more time and more money and more time just to get him to not debut on the opening AEW Dynamite. I guess until they saw that show, they believed that it was going to be some competition or trouble for them. Apparently, they had never spoken to Tony Khan on the telephone. If they'd called me, I could have told him, don't bother worrying. But to turn around and then do that, because I've said this before, I'll say it again. They were just chasing them to get them to stay because they didn't want them to go to the opposition. Okay, that's fine. That's business. But once you've made a commitment, it's not those guys' fault they wanted to go elsewhere. They had a good deal and things they wanted to do. You talked them into staying, so now the burden's on you to keep your end of the fucking bargain, pandemic or no. When you've told guys you're going to set them up for life and promise them that amount of money over that amount of time and it don't last fucking 3 months, fuck you. I'm sorry. Fuck you. And once again, if Anderson and Gallows got a lot more restraint than I would.
Well, let me ask you, and I want to ask you about specific things they said. I have some quotes here, but to go back to the Monday Night Wars, Razor and Diesel, Nash and Hall, they went to WCW. They were main eventers.
Right.
Vince obviously did everything he could to make sure Shawn Michaels didn't go to WCW, where his friends were.
Yeah, well, and he thought that I've told that story before, he thought that he had made sure Nash and Hall weren't going anywhere either, because we were out in, God, where was it? Des Moines, Iowa, somewhere out in the heartland at TV, and both Nash and Hall had told Vince to his face, they're staying. We're with you, Vince, because he came back telling me and Bruce and Jari, oh, they said, they're with us. He said, Hall said, I wouldn't be anything without you, boss. I would never leave. And then they faxed their resignations. That was Tuesday night, right? We get back to the Stamford on Wednesday. On Thursday, the resignations were on the fax machine. So, yeah. But they were top guys, and Vince freaked out about that because not only was he losing 2 top guys, but he wasn't prepared to lose them at that point because they told him they were staying.
And Vince didn't want other than Bret Hart, Vince didn't want any of his top guys going to WCW. No,
and the only reason he would tolerate it with Bret was because he wanted to get out from under the big contract he'd signed with Bret. If he'd been on a normal contract, he wouldn't have wanted him to go anywhere either.
And we even saw that with the Ultimate Warrior, who had a big problem with the company in 1996. Vince tried to bring him back after that because of him going to WCW.
Yes. And offered him all that money. I would have done the Bill Watts Grizzly Smith thing and said, here, I'll give you this money if you'll go to WCW and ruin their business from within.
So those are top guys. Not meant to be disrespectful to Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows. I don't think they're anywhere near that level. Would Vince have reacted the same way if it was a Bob Holly or a JBL? Bradshaw at the time. Justin Hawk Bradshaw, I think still, actually.
No.
If they had said, we're going to go to WCW once our contract is up, would there have been a big play to sign a mid-card guy to keep them in the 1990s?
Well, they would have tried to re-sign the guys you just mentioned or anybody on that level. They would have probably even offered them a little bit more money than they were making or whatever, but there would not have been a bidding war or this full court press to sign the In some cases, Vince would have probably said, well, he's been here for a while. Maybe he'll get over, learn a new hold down there or something. Vince used to make fun because Jim Ross would say, why can't a guy just go away for a while and come back after he's learned a new hold? Just something, make it different. How can I miss you if you won't go away?
Because Chris Jericho's kind of been doing his own thing for a while, so you can't really include him, but Moxley's the only guy that was actually a top guy, or at least near that level in WWE, who chose AEW. Everyone else was a mid-card guy in the WWE. Cody Rhodes.
That wanted to get turned loose and show what they could do. And unfortunately now are being turned loose. It's like, instead of being a fucking sheep in a pen that's just being bred for slaughter, you're a fucking sheep with no sheep herder in AEW. You just wandered around in the fields all loose on your own with no guidance.
So where do you think this comes from now where, like a guy like Brody Lee, these guys that WWE really desperately tried to lock down before AEW? Again, not top guys. That's the way you phrased it is the exact way to phrase it. Before AEW. I guarantee you that there would not be that level of bidding or putting, and I like Anderson and Gallows both. I know them. I've worked with them. I like them.
I don't know a lot of people in the wrestling business today worth $750,000 a piece, much less those guys the way they had been presented there. As we've always talked about, it's not how good you are, how talented you are. It's how you've been presented to the audience in the place that you're at. You can't go from zero to hero in fucking overnight. So no, I don't think they were worth $750,000 just because almost in these days, almost nobody is, at least in terms of ratings or fucking ticket sales before this, maybe merchandise, there's a few guys, but so you're right in that respect, but they didn't ask them. Gallows and Anderson didn't ask the WWE to continue to give them offers. They said, we're going to go over here and do this thing that we've promised to do with our friends and go work Japan. And we'll be fine. Thank you. And they kept after them. So I'm sorry, but yeah.
Well, let's get some actual quotes here. Because again, the story goes that they were getting set to meet with Tony Khan, and the day before was when they decided to sign with WWE, which that just seems like bad timing. I don't know what they were thinking.
Well, yeah, well, and to be honest, they'd given their word that they were going to AEW, and that caused some bad feelings with their I guess their Buck buddies, their buddies of the Bucks. That's in another life. If they were an actual babyface team, they should have a fan club and let all the kids be the Buck buddies. But anyway, so they went back on their word. But if somebody in the wrestling business had ever told me, Jim, we're going to come work for you, but then they called me at the last minute and said, no, somebody just offered us $4.5 million over the next 5 years each to not do that, I'd say, goddamn, please take it. So that.
Well, again, to the topic of them blaming Paul Heyman, this is a quote from the show. This is from Carl Anderson. Brody Lee texted me and goes, quote, they fucked you guys. We fucked our friends, and we feel we fucked them over. We don't feel good about it because we know where we wanted to be. This is their choice not to go to AEW, to re-sign with WWE, and then WWE cutting them when the pandemic hit. Getting that call, referring to the call from Mark Carano in Talent Relations, it didn't feel good. It took me back to having these conversations with Triple H, and he looks at me and goes, dude, I look at you and I see your kids. I think about, what if AEW doesn't last? I can promise you one thing. WWE will always be here.
Well, he wasn't lying. They always will be there. It just Anderson and Gallows won't be a part of it.
We stopped being boss and employee at that point, and we were obviously not friends, but two human beings talking. I'm not saying that Triple H could have stopped anything or even cared, but hearing that from your boss and having it happen, it's like, damn, they don't give a fuck. Trying to get to the bottom of it because it did feel weird. Asking around, we heard, well, it was Paul Heyman inspired. Really? We told AJ that. He asked someone what they think of it. That person said yes. AJ went to Paul and said, did you fire these guys or put the word in? Paul said, no, you have my word that I didn't do this. If I would have known, I would have gone to bat for them. AJ went back to the same guy, asked again, and then went to Vince. AJ goes to Vince and said, tell me the truth. Is Paul the one who said fire these guys? Vince told AJ, quote, they weren't on my list, but yes, it was a Heyman thing. And then Gallows jumps in and says, he said we were making too much money for what we were doing, and he's a fucking liar and a piece of shit. What do you think? And we've all talked about Paul Heyman's issues with honesty in the past, but the idea that they're blaming him for them being released instead of Vince. What do you think?
Nobody has a list of people to be released unless it comes from Vince McMahon or has been approved by Vince McMahon. Unless you are so anonymous and nondescript and low down on the totem pole that nobody even knows you're there, then in that case, then Vince might turn around, hey, where did so-and-so go? I haven't seen him in a while. But anybody who means anything, no. If the writers don't have anything for you, they'll tell Vince they don't have anything for you. And Vince will either say, well, find something because we're paying him, or okay, well, let's let him go. If Paul had a list of anything, it was suggestions, because nobody gets to make a list of anything except suggestions around Vince McMahon. And so now I can believe that Paul heard Vince bury these guys for putting up a fight about re-signing or holding them up for more money or whatever, or oh god, and somehow Paul got the idea that if he put in a few well-placed fucking verbal boots to him, that it would get over with Vince. I can believe he did that. I can believe he conveniently at a convenient time to get a pop or a nod out of Vince, put the mouth on him, as Dennis would say. But he didn't make any decisions that Vince McMahon either didn't tell him to make or approve of to begin with. And nobody else does either. It just, so yeah, I mean, both of those things could be true, but it's not like Heyman could have saved him if Vince didn't want him to be saved. And it's not like Heyman could have fired him if Vince didn't want him fired. So there you go.
And they made a bad decision. They should have done AEW in New Japan.
Boy, especially now, they'd only be working one time a week, maybe. And the good talent that they do have in AEW only gets TV once every 3 weeks or whatever. I guess they do YouTube, but we don't care because that's where they hide all their outlaw guys that they're embarrassed to show in public.
But that's taped on the same day as the other stuff.
Well, now that there's no fans, they're not hurting those fans' feelings. Before, when they were having to tape the dark matches involving their, outlaw guys and freak show contingent, they had to actually show that shit to the people that had paid for tickets. Now they can just slide it in there and they've got an audience that's going to cheer for whatever. Well, they had that before. Before, they had an audience that paid to get in and would still cheer for whatever they saw, regardless whether it sucked or not. Now they have no audience except the people they let come in, but they don't have to fucking tell them what to do, and they do the same thing. But they don't pay. They don't pay to get in there. So, there's something to be said for that.
A few more questions this week, Jim. This was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Brian in Wilkesboro, North Carolina.
Wilkesboro or North Wilkesboro?
It says Wilkesboro.
Okay, just want to make sure. I want to make sure he was from the right side of town.
What are you telling me about North Wilkesboro?
Well, boy, I'll tell you what. I checked in a hotel there one night, stuck the key in the door, broke the window. Room was so small I had to step outside to change my mind. They stole my towels, I'll have you know.
Okay.
All right.
Let's get this question here. During a segment on Busted Open this past month, Tommy Dreamer mentioned that before NXT, Triple H's original idea was to build a minor league system similar to what baseball uses, with Paul Heyman, Gabe Sapolsky, and Jim Cornette each in charge of a territory. According to Dreamer, wrestlers would have to pass through each territory before making it to the main roster. The idea got shot down. Dreamer said, and so they went with NXT. I was wondering if Jim had ever heard about this, and if he thought a minor league setup like that could work in today's industry.
Well, I heard about it when it was first thought up, which was years before that. The original idea for developmental in 99 and 2000, 2001 was that there would be a number of developmental territories. OVW was the first, obviously, because we started the thing, had the idea. JR had me come down as an experiment. But then Les Thatcher had the HWA, Heartland Wrestling Association, up in Cincinnati and had a school. And everybody had known Les for years. And so they gave him a developmental deal. Since Cincinnati and Louisville were only 100 miles apart, but different TV markets, then that kept the product separate. And they tried to do the same thing with Deep South, and they tried to do the same thing with that fucking goofy, bald-headed idiot Rick Bassman out. That was just an excuse for Bruce to fly to Los Angeles once in a while, and Bassman would take him to titty bars. They got no work done there, and he never trained any decent wrestlers because it was just a showbiz Hollywood bullshit fucking wrestling school out there. But at least we got Cena away from him.
Well, you really don't like Bassman. Every time his name comes up, you kill him.
Yeah, because he's a piece of shit. He was one of those guys, every time that there was a TV documentary to be done to expose the business, they'd come to him and he'd provide them wrestlers to make sure that, you know, as long as you fucking give me a credit or a check or whatever, you know, I don't care what you're saying about the wrestling business. Remember that Aaron Aguilera? I can't remember what name he worked on the West Coast.
Yeah, he's the one he was in the, he was with Carlito against Cena. Right?
Yes, yes. Well, they sent him to OVW about 2 weeks after I had seen one of those Rick Bassman cooperated exposés on television. This was back in like 2004. And I was sitting in Danny Davis's office cussing that fucking Bassman, telling Danny what a piece of shit he was, how they exposed the business on television, and everybody that went along with it should have been shot and boiled in oil. They just signed him and sent him there. I was in that show. They did that last year. Motherfucker, I kept him off TV for the first couple of months he was here. And I can't remember, if he had long hair, I made him shave it. If he had shaved hair, I made him grow it out long and changed his name to something else before I would put him on OVW television. So nobody would recognize him as having been a part of the expose. Another time, Rick Bassman brought that Tom Howard, who was a heck of a talent, and this other guy as a tag team for a dark match tryout at one of the Raw tapings. And he insisted on being their manager, Ricky B. Well, Tom Howard's partner was one of the most, he looked like Ultimate Warrior his first year in the business, one of the most cartoonishly jacked up, steroided bodybuilders I'd ever seen. And he had only had 3 or 4 matches. And he was the shits, even though he's a nice guy and tried hard. But Bassman brought him because he knew Vince liked bodies, and Bassman was all about trying to get guys signed, because another thing that Bassman had was a fucking deal that if you went to his wrestling school, you signed a deal. If you got signed, he got a percentage of your money on an ongoing basis with apparently no cutoff date. Can you imagine if he'd have got 10 or 20% of Cena's money if those contracts had I helped everybody that I ever knew sign a contract like that with him or anybody else, find a lawyer to get out of it, because that's bullshit. Train a guy and then say, okay, now you owe me money for the rest of your fucking life. Okay, moolah.
Yeah, at least Vern had a cutoff with Flair.
Yeah, Vern had a cutoff. Yes, exactly. So Ricky B was the manager of this big bodybuilding fuck, and Tom Howard, who was a heck of a talent. And Howard was incredibly impressive, and I think if he'd have been having a single match, he might have got a job. But with this schlub tag team, bodybuilder tag team partner, and the goofy manager didn't know what he was doing, outside it was a shitty match, and none of them got a job, and they just humored the guy because he gave them local job guys as fill-in talent from his fucking school. And also took Bruce to titty bars when he went out there. So that's why Rick Bassman, for a short period of time, was affiliated. Then I'll have you know, we started doing shows at Six Flags Kentucky Kingdom here in Louisville and had an exclusive contract. But that was our big fucking contract, OVWs of the year. They paid us more money per capita for time and effort involved than the WWF did. And they called me up one day and said, we just got a brochure from this wrestling company saying they wanted to put shows on at all the Six Flags. Oh, send that over to me. Bassman had made up flyers using Cena on the front of his flyer, even when Cena was already in Louisville. He wasn't in the WWF yet, but he was already in Louisville. He was working for us. And he'd sent him out to all the Six Flags in the country, trying to sell shows, and got to ours and said official developmental territory of the WWE or something, like, when it wasn't. It wasn't at the time. He was lying because he did that often. He had a contract for like 6 months, but he said he was a developmental territory for like 5 years. So I called the fucking office, talked to JR, and said, you tell this little bald-headed piece of shit that if he ever sends any more advertising material to our Six Flags, especially featuring talent on the cover of his brochure that we've got on our show, I will find him and I will fuck him up, that little midget, bald-headed sack of shit, skull fuck him and leave his remains in a ditch. Which was second only to the promo that I actually did call up and cut on him on his voicemail because he wouldn't answer his phone. When I think it was over Sylvester Turkey, I think had one of those deals where he had been trained out there in Santa Cana, and they tried to take some of his money. I think one of them had to go to a lawyer. I can't remember who it was to get out of it. But anyway, I'd found out about this, and I called up and I videotaped this fucking ass chewing, and then took it to Danny Davis's Super Bowl party and played it for all the boys that had come from California and knew who he was. So you piece of shit, you business raping piece of fucking shit, trying to stick your hand in all these guys' pockets when you taught them nothing but how to write a check, and everything they got was on their looks and their talent, not your say-so, because nobody thinks anything of you but a piece of shit and a piece of dog shit on the heel of a wrestling boot of our business. So fuck you. They all like that. So anyway, yeah, Rick Bassman, fuck him. What was the question?
A potential WWE minor league system with you, Paul Heyman, and Gabe Sapolsky.
Yeah, so anyway, there were supposed to be these territories. One territory was Cincinnati, Louisville, Deep South for a while there. They were at Florida Championship Wrestling was originally supposed to just be part of the family instead of the only place. That's, we knew what they were doing. They were trying to get Florida set up because all the friends lived there and all the people that wanted jobs lived there. But no, the idea was never pitched. And I don't know, the timing of that is suspect because Gabe Sapolsky was with Ring of Honor until 2009. I wasn't with the WWE at all or OVW after 2005. And Heyman was there for the run with Brock early and then got on the shit list and went looking for Larry for years and didn't come back until they needed him with Brock again. So, no, I don't think that the timing of that, I think maybe somebody said it and Tommy heard it or whatever, but he wasn't around at the point where this could have, actually, it never could have happened. Because, like I said, Gabe was with Ring of Honor until I was gone from WWE. Paul was with WWE for the while there. They sent him down here to try to replace me. And he got out of that as quickly as he could because he didn't want to be here. So no. It sounds like something that sounds like a good story that somebody probably wishful thinking came up with.
Do you think a minor league system would work or would be a good idea right now in 2020 for WWE?
Well, fuck, of course. Of course. We've talked about the umpteen reasons why you can learn more in a place like OVW or in a territory, a place that's run like a territory, than you can in a place that's run like NXT, where there's too many people. Nobody gets focused on. Everybody works the same and trains the same and looks the same and is not encouraged to be different. And, it's just another TV product. You need to go out. You need to fucking work the goddamn spot shows. You need to be on a local television, and you need to have only a peripheral liaison or working relationship or whatever, or relationship, the wrestler with the WWE, because that's why I always said the OVW guys, I didn't reveal all of them had contracts that did. Every once in a while, I'd reveal so-and-so has won by virtue of his winning the OVW title, or this great showing against this WWE superstar has been awarded a contract. It's a long sought after and hard fought proposition to get one of these. They don't hand them out like candy. And it was a big deal then to the fans when somebody that they liked locally would get one. But if just there's 100 guys here and they're all signed up to the WWE a little territory in a regional market that you can run affordably like a Louisville or a Cincinnati or whatever, not fucking Orlando, Florida. That's as stupid as going to Dallas, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, Los Angeles, Chicago, or fucking Philadelphia. You could spend a fucking $1 million just to get started. And run it like a territory, and that's where guys get and use guys as preliminary guys, and use guys as middle guys, use guys as main event guys. That's where they learn what they're doing. It's just that's another thing that's lost. That's why these guys work like they do today. It's not all their fault. There's no place to go and learn how to do it properly. You can learn how to do the moves the same way as everybody else does, but you can't learn how to work, because most of working is not moves, it's thinking and realizing why you're doing what you're doing, or when to do it, or what reaction it should get. And you don't do that until you try a bunch of shit and fuck up on your own a lot.
Our next question was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from John Campopiano.
What?
In Boston, Massachusetts.
That sounds like either a brand of Italian seasoning or a off-color sexual act.
I think that's how you say his name. John Campopiano, Boston, Massachusetts. I was wondering, can you talk about Curtis Hughes? Specifically his stint as Big Cat in WCW and as Mr. Hughes in the WWF. What kind of worker was he? I also know he had short stints in the USWA and ECW. Thank you for your time. Love the show.
Actually, I've met Curtis Hughes a number of times, a lot of these fan fests and everything, and I think he was he up in the WWF for a real short session?
He was there in 93. I don't remember if he was still there when you came in, but he was there in 93 because they had him set up for a feud with The Undertaker.
Yeah, I think we passed in the night there, and then he lost a lot of size, lost a lot of weight later on. I've seen him at conventions, but nice guy, and he was a good worker, I thought, for the time that he was in the business. And a guy that size, he kind of was like the Black Big Bubba Rogers gimmick, the suit and the sunglasses, hat, bodyguard type. The reason I laughed when I first heard you mention his name is because I just loved the story. I think I've told it before, but what the fuck? I've told a lot of these before. When he was Lex Luger's bodyguard, Mr. Hughes, they were this was at a time where, WCW was spending a lot of money on Luger and on the top guys like that. So they had Luger staying at Marriott's and, nice 4-star hotels. And he was getting paid a bunch of money, right? Mr. Hughes was not being compensated like that. But what he would do, because he was on TV as Lex Luger's bodyguard, and the front desk clerk knew that Lex Luger, Larry Fole, the big WCW wrestling superstar, was staying in their fucking hotel. How do you miss Luger when he walks in? So Curtis Hughes would go after the matches, would go to the desk clerk of the hotel that Luger was staying in, that WCW was paying for, and say, I'm Lex Luger's bodyguard, and I'm going to be here in the lobby overnight. And he'd sleep on the couch in the lobby for free. And they'd look over him because, that's that big bodyguard for that wrestler. And then the next morning he'd get up and go in the bathroom and splash his fucking face and he free night in a fucking hotel. I mean, you pick up on these things as you get on the road, like everybody was back in those days. But no, I thought from what I saw of his matches, he could move. He was a good athlete, and that size, he looked like a grown man, and he could strike some fear into some people, but he didn't have that super long of a career.
And I guess famously, he was a narcoleptic.
Oh, well, yeah, and that's another reason why it was so easy for him to go to sleep in the lobby of the fucking hotels, because he nodded off in the corner sometimes in a tag match. Or if he was managing, they would look over, and because he had narcolepsy, and he'd be asleep, standing there. Hey, Curtis. Oh, I mean, I've seen a lot of fucking matches, especially over the last few years, that I would like to have gone to sleep watching, but I've never actually gone to sleep in the middle of being in the middle of a match.
Is that why he wrestled? I mean, I hadn't thought about this. Is that why he wrestled with his sunglasses on? Because he was a narcoleptic?
No way. He might go to sleep standing in the corner on a tag match or in the corner as a manager, but he wouldn't actually go to sleep when he was in the middle of something like that. The opponent would wake him up. But no, it looked good. It fit the gimmick. I should have thought of that for Big Bubba, but I don't know. That may have been cartoon for Bubba.
There was some sort of wrestling hotline, I remember, in like 1994 or 1993 here in New York. There were always free wrestling hotlines popping up, and this one had like a wrestling trivia contest you had to answer. And I always remember the question because it was, when Lex Luger entered the World Wrestling Federation, what was his name? A, the narcissist, B, the narcoleptic, Or C, the narc. I still remember that to this day.
That's like the fucking $100 question on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. It's like, let's give it, if you have a pulse, you can answer this. Just, we want to get you in the door. Did you see, I can't remember what the question was, and it was years ago, but somebody actually missed the $250 question, or was it 200? The second question on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Missed it. And even old Regis was like, are you sure you want that to be your final? Yeah, final answer, Regis. You're really positive you want that to be? And he's kicking the guy in the shins. Yeah, final answer. Right, Speaking of final answers, give me a final question.
Here is our final question. This was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Marcellus Hambrick in Bucksnort, Tennessee.
Well, all right. If that is indeed your real name and location.
Well, Bucksnort, Tennessee is the home of the Dirty White Boy, isn't it?
Well, but I don't know about Marcellus.
Marcellus Hambrick.
I don't know. I don't know if they can spell Marcellus down in Bucksnort. Exit 152 off I-40 in between Jackson and Memphis.
Well, let's get this question from exit
Jackson 152. And Nashville, I should say. Jackson and Nashville.
Jim, what is your opinion of Sid Vicious? His career, his runs in WWE, including his title run. Also, was he ever approached about working for you in Smoky Mountain?
Oh.
I met him at a softball tournament in Little Rock. Of course you did. Of course he did. I met him at a softball tournament in Little Rock quite a few years ago, and he was very approachable, unlike what I heard about him previously.
Well, it's not that he's not approachable and he's a prick. He's a lunatic, but he's not a prick. Sid is a big old country boy that had those genetics and got into bodybuilding and ended up looking like that. And when somebody looks like that, naturally, people are going to ask him to get into wrestling, or at least back in those days when you had to be a grown man. He was never a natural worker. He was never good at in-ring wrestling, but he had that look and that intensity and the look on his face. And even when he was saying nonsense, he looked scary doing it. And then, of course, he was exposed inside the wrestling business through a couple of various incidents as not being able to fight and his muscles being all show, no go. And if he had had a more open mind about learning how to work, he may have been better at it. But Sid don't think on the same level as everybody else about a lot of various things. So he's always been nice to me, except when, the midnight matches with the skyscrapers, I've said were just awful, but at least Sid looked like a star, whereas Spivey just sucked. But the worst thing about the thing when I've heard that he was coming back in fucking 97 or whenever, the WWF, I'm like, well, fuck, because it had just been a year or whatever since the deal with Arn. I've always liked Arn Anderson as a person and as a wrestler. And it
was a few years before 97, just for the record. Okay,
well, it was a couple of years, whatever the fuck. The point is, I hadn't seen him since that happened, and I didn't want to see him. And I told Vince, I said, the fucking guy's a psycho, and that's where Psycho Sid came from. Because I was saying he's a fucking psycho. You want to hire this guy that fucking stabbed Arn Anderson and caused all this fucking chaos. I said, you don't know whether he's going to show up or go to softball. I've told the story that time he told downtown Bruno Harvey Whippleman he was having a heart attack and had to leave the building in San Antonio before his interview, where I'd had to talk him into coming, tell his wife he had to come or Vince was going to fire him because he'd been off injured. And he was at a softball tournament that day. He was off injured, but he took the boys up to the softball in West Memphis or whatever. She even said,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but the softball stories, because those are always the ones people point to. It's always softball, squeegee, stabbing.
Yeah.
With the softball stuff, when you were on the booking committee, were you already hearing stories about that? When did it start that people knew that he was a big softball guy? Was he playing with Lawler?
Oh, goddamn, yes. Yes. He played, he coached kids in West Memphis softball team. He played on a softball team. He did anything with softball. In what was it, 90 or 91 or whatever the fuck that they had the first time he left WCW and went to the WWF? 92? 91. Okay, the deal he had given Jim Herd was, you give me X amount of $100,000 a year. I think it was like $400,000, and Herd agreed to that. And you make me the world champion, and Herd agreed to that. And you give me softball season off. And he wouldn't agree to that, and that's why Sid went to the WWF. And then when I called to say Vince demands Sid be in San Antonio, injured or not, all he's got to do is an interview. And his wife was like, well, he's taking the team up to West Memphis or whatever. She said, sometimes he thinks he might just be happier if he went back to selling farm chemicals. I'm like, a lot of other guys would be happier too if he did that. Sean wanted to work with him because Sid would err on the side of safety and be very light rather than Vader, who was erring on the other side and would be very convincing. But you always knew Sid, he was going to get hurt, or he was going to get in a bad mood, or softball season was going to come up, or something was going to happen in his mind. And he wasn't going to be there long. And plus, as I told Jim Herd, and I tried to reiterate with Vince McMahon, Sid's a guy you steal a pay-per-view with. He can't perform week in, week out, every TV show, every show. People see through him easy. Bring him in and bring him out and keep him in the shadows and then blow something with him and get a big fucking pay-per-view main event and people won't see through it. He's like a modern-day Magnificent Zulu. But they wanted to try to fucking just work him like one of the boys. And
Vince didn't care about the stabbing?
No. Well, we don't know what happened over there. That's another company, because I'm like, what the fuck? All I know is Arn Anderson didn't instigate it. He didn't instigate it in the bar. He told Sid to shut the fuck up after Arn had a few cocktails, and he's done that to a lot of people and made him look like an idiot because Arn verbally can do that. But Arn was in his room when Sid went knocking on the door to continue it, and Sid went with the fucking chair leg. So that, to me, puts him in the wrong. They were Arn's scissors, but Arn grabbed them as a defensive mechanism and got to stab Sid first before Sid took him away because he had the drop on Arn when Arn opened the door and he came around from the side with the chair leg. So, fuck Sid, be quite honest. I'm sure it was roid rage because I can't imagine he's still alive with the amount of chemicals he's pumped in his body. He should have blown up long before now. I've never been able to say anything bad about him personally, otherwise he was a rotten wrestler, but fuck him for doing that to Arn. Just because Arn told him in front of the boys what all the boys thought of him, because he was running his mouth about how great he was, and he wasn't.
In terms of the name Psycho Sid, who decided on the spelling? S-Y-C-H-O.
That was either Vince or Creative Services, the folks that brought you Chili McFreeze. I don't know, because so, well, we can spell it with an S. Okay, all right, whatever the fuck. But as a matter of fact, it was Vince, because he's Psycho Sid. That's good shit, pal.
Was he using that line back then? Good shit?
He doesn't use it like other people use their favorite phrase, but you would hear, that's good shit, in that voice of his, and it's memorable just because of the way he says it. But he doesn't say it every goddamn day.
Because that's one of the things Moxley and I think maybe even Brody Lee said about Vince, where he would defend stuff by saying, it's such good shit.
Well, yeah, he does that. I'm not saying he does it in every meeting every day, but yes, that is a Vince thing that Vince says. That's good shit, pal. And then, it's like Edward G. Robinson never really said you dirty rat every time he opened his mouth, but yeah. That became the fucking cliche. You dirty rat, you killed my brother, you dirty rat.
Well, on that note, we wrap up.
You dirty rat, you killed my business, you dirty rat. I wouldn't be able to find the rat that killed this business. Like, God damn, the old whore the night after the prom. Everybody had a shot at her.
All right. The drive-thru is closed. Of course, you could hear the Jim Cornette Experience when it debuts on Friday, wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And the Experience and the drive-thru available on the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel, tinyurl.com/official corny YouTube. Or just go to YouTube and search for Jim Cornette for full episodes, clips of episodes, as well as omnibus collections, all with the fantastic artwork of Travis Heckel. Check it out today. the official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. You can hear classic episodes of The Experience and the Drive-Thru by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Cornette. $5 a month gets you in the door. We have just hit 2015. We just put up some episodes this past weekend with Danny Davis of OVW, talking OVW with Jim. So we talked developmental earlier today. Hear them talking about it on the show in 2015. Once again, patreon.com.
At a time where we could actually name names.
Patreon.com/Cornette. You can follow Jim on Twitter at the Jim Cornette. You can follow me on Twitter at Great Brian Last. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast. 605pod.com are available wherever it is that you find your favorite podcasts. Of course, Cornette's Collectibles at jimcornette.com. What do you want to say about what's going on there?
We are back open again, ladies and gentlemen, at jimcornette.com. Right now, a 5 to 7 day turnaround, but please allow 2 to 3 weeks for full delivery. Books, pictures, t-shirts, DVDs, a plethora of fine pro wrestling products for your perusal at jimcornette.com.
Check that out today, but until Friday on The Experience and next week right here on the Drive-Thru, I'm going to go edit this sucker. For Jim Cornette, I'm the Great Brian Last. Tally-ho!